All right, hello YouTube. Welcome to Geekery Abides, episode 23. Delayed 1 week, so we were actually on the 23rd on the for the 23rd episode. That's fitting, I suppose. Had a family Christmas party that I was told about very late in the game that interfered with last week. So I did the Dark Tower show, but did not do this show. But yeah, here I am to do this episode 23, where we're going to be talking about some Christmas movies, because as I said, it is the 23rd of December. I guess I didn't say December earlier, but it is indeed Christmas Eve. So that will be the topic at hand, but let's hit the intro first, because right now we are just in the little YouTube tease section, not on the podcast yet. The podcast hasn't started, so let's go ahead and hit the intro and get the podcast people joining us.
He who is ashamed of his geekery has forgotten the face of Stan Lee.
You the proud, the geeky.
This is the podcast, Geekery Abides.
Hello and welcome to the podcast Geekery Abides. I was just talking to the YouTube side before starting the podcast, mentioning that it's the 23rd of December, Christmas Eve. Had to delay this episode 1 week because of a family Christmas party that I found out about late in the game last week, so I'm here to make up for it, here on the verge of the holiday. So I am Tad. Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. If you're new, if you're joining us for as a repeat listener, definitely welcome and thank you for supporting the show. So let's go ahead and dive in real quick. First of all, if you want to contact the show, and I do have an email to read for this episode, it is you can contact the show at TADD at geekeryabides.com. That is the email address. Send an email that direction. Hit me up with anything you want, anything that you might have, whether it be feedback, input, reactions to something I said, something I didn't say, whether you agree, disagree, whatever, show ideas, all kinds of fun stuff. The email bag is open for all things when it comes to contacting the show. So that is the email. Let's go ahead and jump on over to what have you been watching, reading, playing? So for me, it's been pretty basic. I mostly just been watching Seinfeld, doing a rewatch of that. I love that show. I don't know where I'm at in I think I'm in season 6 or 7, somewhere in there. I don't remember where the Festivus episode is, but that is maybe one I'm going to jump ahead and watch, because that's a great one. Festivus for the rest of us. That's fun stuff. Also, just watch at least part of Revenge of the Sith. I'll probably watch the rest of it here in the next few days. I mentioned on the last episode that I had watched Attack of the Clones. I feel like I repeatedly since 2019 have wanted to dive back in and watch all of Star Wars all the way through. And I'd watched episode 1 multiple times and then petered out and didn't actually finish the marathon. Not marathon, I was going to watch them all at once, but I never got through it. So I just skipped episode 1, even though I love that movie. Went to episode 2, now I'm into episode 3. And then from there, I believe what I'm going to do is stop and watch Solo and Rogue One. Those would be chronologically in between the prequels and the original trilogy. So those are probably coming up next on the docket. We'll see what the holiday has when it comes to watching schedule. Hopefully I've got some time to watch some stuff, and I'll have more to report next week when we're back for the final episode of 2024. 2024 has been on my head recently. I also wanted to call out for those watching. Let me go ahead and drop the mic and show you my ugly Christmas sweater that I am wearing for this episode. speaking of Star Wars, for those listening, it is a Boba Fett ugly Christmas sweater. Boba Fett being one of my favorite characters. I could not say no to it. It isn't necessarily as big as I would hoped. I ordered it online somewhere, and then when I got a notification that it was being shipped, and it said something about coming into the country, that's when I probably knew that I may, because I actually ordered a size that would usually be kind of drowning on me. I tend to like sweaters a little bit bigger, but of course it seems like whenever I buy something and it's from overseas somewhere, the sizing gets all out of whack. So it fits, but not as comfortable as I'd like. So if you do see me, whatever, jogging around, it's brand new. It just came in the mail yesterday, but I am proud of my Boba Fett ugly Christmas sweater. So, and then also the other thing I watched in the meantime since the last episode, I went to theaters and saw Godzilla -1. And I do have to say, I am not a massive Godzilla fan. I always love kaiju movies, big giant monsters. I'm a sucker for. Like I love King Kong. The original is my all-time favorite of King Kong. But I like the Kong Skull Island. There's been some of the newer ones that were not too bad that I enjoyed. Godzilla, seen a few here and there, but I'm nowhere near a hardcore fan of some people. But I went into Godzilla -1 because I kept hearing how not only was it potentially one of the best Godzilla movies ever made. A lot of people were saying that, but there were a lot of people that were also saying it may be one of the best movies of the year, and that was not what I would expect to hear from a giant monster movie. And I feel like the last time that an unexpected genre of movie was called like the best of the year turned out to be Mad Max Fury Road back in, was that 2017? So obviously that movie was unreal. It was absolutely incredible. So with the same kind of buzz going in, I don't really read reviews, but I follow a lot of film stuff, a lot of filmmakers, people online on Twitter, social media, all that fun stuff. And a lot of times just through osmosis, I kind of hear, if there's something that people are really raving about, I'll see it that way versus going and reading any reviews. I don't think I read a single review for it. That's generally my standard operating procedure. But I went into it not knowing anything about it. It absolutely blew me away. So the first thing that I've realized pretty quick is it did not transition, so it was 100% in Japanese and subtitled. I have no problem with that. If it was Tad from high school, I probably would have had a bigger problem with that. But I've never had I had an issue with it when I was younger, but the one that actually changed my issue when it comes to subtitles was The Godfather, the original Godfather. We actually talked about the Godfather series last episode, and that changed it for me because, there's a good portion of the movie, whether it be a half or a third of the movie, they're speaking Italian and you get subtitles, and I think just having that both, where I could hear most of it in English but then some of it was in subtitles, I think was kind of the gateway that allowed me to really able to engage with subtitled movies a lot more, which is great. I'm blanking on who said it. I think it was the was it the director of The Parasite that said that there's a small gateway of an inch of text along the bottom of the screen is the gateway to a whole new world of film for a lot of people. If you can just get over subtitles, you can see a lot of really incredible movies from all over the world, and I totally agree. And Parasite was an incredible movie as well. But either way, there's been a couple newer Godzilla movies in the last couple of years. The last one I saw was 2014, I think, or Kong versus Godzilla. I went and saw that one too. But those are in English, so I wasn't sure what to expect here. This one was in Japanese. It was actually also a period piece. It took place right after World War II. Basically, that's where the -1 comes from, is, basically 0 is the end of World War II, because Japan is so utterly obliterated that everything from there is 0, and then it's, -1, -2. You move on beyond the destruction. But it was a really great movie. I think the thing that really struck me, and it's actually kind of what my biggest complaint of like the 2014 Godzilla movie with Bryan Cranston was I felt like Godzilla was all fine and dandy, but I just felt like the human characters were basically just not that compelling, which is really insane because you had Bryan Cranston that was, coming off of Breaking Bad, one of the greatest acting performances in history, and you would expect, him in the movie, it would be great, but they killed him really quick in the movie, which I thought was a huge mistake, and I just felt like I just felt like I was mostly there to watch Godzilla destroy stuff, and I didn't really give a shit about the people. Godzilla -1, the thing as I realized walking out was this movie was so good the story was so good that even if Godzilla didn't exist in the movie, I would have watched it. It would have been a really great movie to watch. I cared about all the characters, not just the main characters, but there was some secondary characters that were absolutely incredible. They really got me caring about all these people, believing in all these people, investing in all these people, so that when Godzilla happened, it was insane. And also, it's one of the first times I've ever seen a Godzilla movie that was actually scary. I mean, I know a lot of them are older, and I'm not going to, badmouth a movie for being older and having an older style. That's not my bag. I love older movies, but they're, a lot of the Godzilla stuff can get pretty comical. It's not necessarily scary, and even in the last couple ones that I mentioned that were in English, the more recent Godzilla movies I had seen, Godzilla was played as a hero, and this one he is certainly not. He is a villain, so that is pretty cool. I highly recommend this to anyone, even if you're not a huge Godzilla fan. I think this is an incredible movie. Like I said, the characters in it were incredible. A really good character building, development arcs, just wonderful stuff. So I did want to stop and talk about that one for a second. Reading, I just read the book Ghost in the Wires by Kevin Mitnick. He was considered one of the most wanted hackers for a long time. And he wrote Ghost in the Wires about his whole story, and he actually just passed away earlier this year, kind of a legend in the hacking community, and so I decided to buy his book and read that, or listen to it, and that was pretty great. And then it was actually funny because this is all jived together, because then next I jumped back into Stephen King, Richard Bachman, and I decided to jump into The Running Man for the first time, and it's just funny the parallels there, because, with Ghost in the Wires, there's multiple times that Kevin Mitnick is, in situations where he's like super paranoid, he's worried about the cops being on him and stuff, and like going to his apartment and like, is there someone sitting in a car nearby that might be watching him? Is that a cop? And he just has to live this super paranoid life. And then I transition into The Running Man, which is about a guy all about paranoia. He's on a game show where people are trying to hunt him down and kill him. And it just feels so similar. I mean, they're absolutely different things. One of them's a real story, and it's more of a nerdy guy, that sits behind a computer and hacks things, versus like a guy on the run trying to make money for his sick family. But it's just the paranoia aspect is kind of shared in both. So those are the two things I've been reading. Also, I meant to mention this earlier. I have a smidge of a cold, so if you hear me sounding a little bit different, I'm hoping I'll be okay. I haven't been like coughing or sneezing or anything crazy, but I have a little bit of congestion that I've been fighting. So if I do sound congested or anything or different, that is why. Forgot to mention that earlier. And then I've been playing Tetris on my Nintendo Switch. I love Tetris. One of my all-time favorite games to just throw on, especially if I may be watching something a little bit that I don't really have to engage with, like Seinfeld. I might pull up my Switch in my hand and play through some Tetris while I'm listening to Seinfeld. Also, a little bit of Jedi Survivor, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Also been playing the MLB The Show as well. I'm a big baseball fan, and it is the dead zone for that. So been playing the video game to keep me satiated. And then I also did turn Red Dead 2 back on. I still have some stuff to mop up to 100% it out, so turn that on for a bit as well in the last little bit. So that is the watching, reading, playing. Let's go ahead and jump over to the news. So the first one is sad news. R.I.P. Andre Braugher, I think is how you say his name. He is, of course, if you're a listener here, most likely you followed us from the Dark Tower show, so you're going to know him as Brent Norton from the Mist. But I think most people probably know him most as Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was absolutely an incredible part of that role. I think he brought a really great performance to both roles. Captain Holt was my favorite character of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I just watched that for the first time in the last year or two. Well, I mean, not this year, not in 2023, but 2022 or 2021, somewhere in there, I went through and binged through it and absolutely adored the whole show. But Captain Holt was my favorite, and Andre Braugher is a big reason why. But also Norton that's the neighbor in The Mist. I loved him because he's kind of I don't know, kind of like antagonistic towards the main character, but I don't think he ever really was felt like a villain. He felt like a real dude living his real life that was engaging with some like a neighbor in a dispute or whatever. He never felt cartoonishly bad, and I just thought that he brought a realism and credibility to Brent Norton that I think a lesser actor would not have. So let me go ahead and throw out our normal sound bite.
Good night, sweet prince.
rest in peace to him. I also have a Captain Holt quote here because why not? It was a fun quote that I found. I wanted to see if I could find like a sound bite, but I believe this was after someone came out to him, and he's actually a gay character, and he says, every time someone steps up and says who they truly are, the world becomes a better and more interesting place. So I thought that was a very beautiful thing, and of course that wasn't Andre Braugher. He performed that line, he didn't write it or anything, but it is from his character, so I did want to throw that out there because I think that's a true thing. So really love that. Sad to lose him, though. It does sound like he had lung cancer, I believe. That came out shortly after. That was the cause of death. I think it was his agent or someone that came out and said that. So that is unfortunate. Sad to lose him. And then next up, let me go ahead and get the other thing up here, is actually the passing of another person, and this one's a quite a bit older, but it is Norman Lear. So Norman Lear is someone a little bit before my time, but for me, he was I feel like he's like the godfather of the sitcom, ultimately. Things like Sanford and Son, Maude, All in the Family, The Jeffersons, but also Princess Bride, which is where I think a lot of younger people probably have seen his influence a bit, as he was involved in The Princess Bride. I can't remember if he produced it. I think he was the producer on it. So yeah, he's done a lot, though. I mean, there's no way to look at modern television and sitcoms without seeing his fingerprints all over them. So it's a little bit before my time, but I could certainly understand the legend that he is in the television realm, especially in the sitcom realm. So,
good night, sweet prince.
So that is that one. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. I do know there is a lot of news. I think there was a bit less when I had it prepped for last week, and then the Christmas party came up, so I had to bump it. So there's been some more news. So this may be the heaviest news episode of the show. Ultimately, I think we got one more news item than the last big one that we had. A lot of news. So the next one here is Saw 11 is coming, and it is coming in September 2024. So they just had Saw 10, which was the highest rated in terms of audience review of all the Saw movies. I think it probably did decently at the box office, considering they're making a sequel. That's usually how it works with horror. If it does well in the box office, more movies are destined to come along behind it. So that is that news article. Next up, let's see, Curb Your Enthusiasm is coming to an end with season 12, which is the upcoming season. Again, I'm watching Seinfeld right now, so very Larry David inspired. I mean, he was a big part of the Seinfeld show, obviously. Some of the best parts in a lot of ways. And then Curb Your Enthusiasm, I've watched a chunk of, but maybe a quarter of it. But I do need to dive in at some point and watch the rest of it. But it does sound like it is coming to an end, which is always sad when a great television show is coming to an end. It's always sad to see. Next up, and this is a crazy one that I didn't see coming, but I'm really excited for. James Wan is set to adapt H.P. Lovecraft's Call of the Cthulhu. That sounds absolutely amazing. James Wan is, I would say, the master of horror in the modern era. Of course, master of horror, I would say, is probably your, John Carpenter's, your Wes Cravens back in the day. But I think James Wan has really held that title this century, since the year 2000 or so. I don't remember exactly when his earliest movies came, but he has been an absolute banger of a filmmaker for horror. And even recently, he did *Malignant* in the last couple of years, which was absolutely incredible. So I cannot wait to see what he has for us for a Cthulhu movie. Lovecraft is obviously one that can be difficult to do on screen because it is so existential, larger. Just the kind of horror that he writes is not necessarily stuff that Lovecraftian, really. I mean, right? It's Lovecraft. It's a Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror type stuff. So I don't know how that necessarily adapts to screen. But if there's one guy that can do it, it'll be James Wan. I do have a quote from him. He says, I have a tendency to want to go back and forth. So whenever I make a smaller film, I want to go make a big film. Whenever I'm doing a big one, I'm like, oh, I want to go do a smaller film. And when I do my smaller films, it tends to be horror films. So, I feel the itch for horror is potentially calling, but we'll see. And that's actually slightly unrelated to this announcement. That was something that was a little bit more recent. But one of the articles I found that was talking about this Cthulhu movie wrote that quote, and I thought it was an interesting insight from him as one that's been bouncing around. He currently has the new Aquaman movie in the theaters, but I cannot wait to see what he has for us for some Lovecraftian horror. Next up, and this is another one kind of out of nowhere, at least for me. I guess if this was something that had already been announced, I was unaware of it. But apparently, Ryan Coogler, which is most famous for doing the Black Panther movies, is developing an X-Files reboot. So, I mean, I always grew up with like the X-Files and Tales from the Crypt and stuff. So this sounds interesting. From what I understand, though, it'd be a complete reboot, not like a soft reboot or a sequel series, meaning that most likely there would not be a Mulder and Scully, which is or if there is, it would be different actors type thing. I don't know what his plans are. But I do not think it's going to be like a legacy sequel or type thing where you'd have Mulder and Scully returning again, unfortunately. So that'll be an interesting thing to see what that might look like. But I'll keep an eye on that. Of course, we had the Twilight Zone redo in the last decade. I think, or this decade. I think it was in like 2019 or 2020. I think it was 2020. So I think it was this decade. If not, it was just barely in the last decade where they did the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone reboot. So I think if Ryan Coogler could do an X-Files reboot, that could be really cool. Next up, we've got we got some Dune news. I've got 3 different Dune headlines to cover here. Let me see here. So the first one is Dune 2 is clocking in at 2 hours and 44 minutes. That is all being locked now, obviously, as it is being set up for theaters. Tickets are being sold here if they're not on sale now, they're going to be on sale very soon. But it's coming out March 1st, so it's coming down the pike pretty quick. And it is now locked at 2 hours and 44 minutes. Continuing the trend, seemingly, with Hollywood movies where everything seems to be clocking in at the over 2.5 hour mark, closer to the 3 hour mark in some cases. It just seems like that's a trend that's happening a lot recently. I can't say that all the movies justify it, but if it does justify it, bring it on, because I loved the first Dune. Can't wait for the next one. And the next news article we've got here, or not news article, but news, is Denis Villeneuve is nearly finished with his Dune 3 script. So that is interesting. But also he did talk on something, the interview, I think, where they asked him about it, and he said that the script is nearly finished. He did say that he did not think it would be his next project, though. So he's done 2 Dune movies, but it sounds like he wants to break it up, do something else, and then return to do the 3rd Dune movie afterwards, which is totally understandable. I get some guys aren't really fond of falling into the same thing for too long of a period of time. So I can totally see him wanting to do something else. He's a very sought-after director. I don't know that there's many people doing, if anyone, that's doing sci-fi as good or better than Denis Villeneuve. So if he were to do something else that was sci-fi, I would be very, very interested in what that might look like and what it would be. Next up, and it is the last Dune one we've got to talk about here, and it is allegedly the Dune 3 is going to be called Dune Messiah, and allegedly that has been greenlit. So a Hollywood Insider, I have a quote from a Hollywood Insider, and he says, "I'm already hearing rumblings that Warner Brothers is so bullish on Villeneuve's vision for Dune that for Villeneuve's vision for Dune that Part 3 has already been greenlit with a 2027 release date in mind." Again, this is all from an insider, so I'm calling this a rumor. But I mean, chances are it'd be unlikely that this is not going to happen. So I think this is a very close one to maybe calling it a news thing instead of rumor, but I'm going to call it a rumor for now. Warner Brothers sees Part 2 as a home run, and internally, and this is again from the insider, and internally, I'm hearing the studio is already projecting an opening north of $100 million for opening weekend. That may be optimistic, but given the trailer, hardly out of the question. So yeah, that's true. The trailers all look great. A lot of people are chomping at the bit. It should have been out by now. I think it should have come out in like mid-October. I think originally was the original release date. Yeah, I think that it will be interesting to see what it does. But ultimately, I think it would take a lot for us not to see a Dune 3 fully getting an official green light. It sounds like, rumor-wise, behind the scenes, it's already a thing. So now going over to the Star Wars corner of the news section here, and the first one feels like vindication for me. So Adam Driver has basically talked recently. I think he was on a sports podcast, the Rich Eisen Show, which is a sports guy, but he tends to do a lot of pop culture stuff. And he had Kylo Ren, reading off the screen here, had Adam Driver on talking about Kylo Ren and talking about the Star Wars movies. And he said some things that made me feel absolutely vindicated, because I've been saying pretty much since that trilogy was coming out, that my opinion was that, I think I've said this before on the show. If not, Peter can always back me up that I've been saying this, that and Hayden, a number of people that are in my friend group, I've been talking about, even in between these movies as they were coming out. My whole thing is that it felt like he was an invert of Vader. Vader was the absolute evil that then started to kind of taper away and then became good at the end. Found unsurety at the end and went good, whereas Kylo wants to be bad. Vader, but Kylo, he wants to be bad, but he's like faltering early on. He's feeling the pull of the good, so to me, like, it almost feels like those are two mirror images. So the other side of that would be the absolute unquestioning evil Vader that was in the original movie should have been the end of Kylo's arc. I've been saying that for years. And when the movies obviously didn't pan out that way, I was a little bit annoyed. But it sounds like I was not far off base here, because here's what Adam Driver said on this podcast. Radio show podcast. I think it was a radio show. I don't know if it's still on the radio or on television, but I know that it is being done as a podcast. It ultimately used to be like a sports show that was on television. But in this day and age, it seems like a lot of those sports shows are being canceled. A lot of these guys are just, kind of doing the, stuff where they just throw what they used to do for full on normal TV, and they do it on like a podcast and on video on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. Maybe something like that. I don't know. On the Rich Eisen Show, he said, and this is a quote from Adam Driver. He says, I had an overall arc in mind that Star Wars: The Force Awakens director J.J. Abrams wanted to do. Which then changed, but his idea was that almost the opposite journey of Vader, where Vader starts mostly confident, mostly committed to the dark side, and by the last movie, he's vulnerable and weak. He wanted to start at the opposite, this character that was supposed to be most confused and vulnerable, and by the end of the three movies would be the most committed to the dark side. I tried to keep that arc in mind regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyway, because, I kept that arc in mind regardless if that wound up not being the journey anyway, because it changed, obviously, while we were shooting, but I still focused on that. So again, I feel like a victory lap for me a little bit, because it seems like what JJ was setting up in the first movie is I was picking up on that because I kept telling people like Kylo should not get redeemed. We should see him being the absolute, bad evil motherfucker by the end of the movie, and he should not get redeemed. That was always my call and my cry. And then in episode 8, when he killed Snoke and became the supreme leader himself, like, that was even more interesting to me, because it's like, not only now do you have like the ultimate, like badass Vader type character, but now he's killed his master and he is going to be the absolute fucking top bad guy too. And so I was like super, super excited about all that stuff. But of course they ruined it in the last movie. And he says, and he goes on with his quote here, says, with Ryan, he took it in a different direction, but it still tracked with the character. Then the last one, it changed into being about Kylo and Rey and the dyad and things like that, and evolving into Ben Solo. And he says, and then this is my favorite part, and evolving into Ben Solo, and that was never part of it. Well, Ben Solo, he was Ben Solo from the beginning, but it was there was never a version where we saw Ben Solo when I signed up for it. So, and I don't think he's necessarily saying that like he's upset because he's, you know, whatever. But I think that he's just talking about what the idea was given to him, and what the thought process was from the beginning. But it also tracks for me that I really do think that almost everything was thrown out the window with 9. And I really just feel like whether it was written by committee or whether it was just a bunch of dipshits that went to message boards and found what they thought would be popular and just tried to throw as much popular shit in there as they could, because that's really what it felt like, is just an absolute fucking clusterfuck. But the thing that always annoys me with all that too is that J.J. Abrams was there. So J.J. was there at the beginning and the end. So it's like, it just feels weird to me that some of the stuff that he established and he wanted to do, he ended up himself throwing out the window in episode 9. It makes no sense to me. There's a lot of issues I have, but a lot of it comes down to I don't know what the fuck J.J. Abrams was smoking as they were going into episode 9. So that's unfortunate, but it is interesting to kind of see that kind of what I've been saying. I mean, it's not just about me and my theories, but I just feel like that's a very interesting take on a character too, you know, like, because again, in episode 4, you get Vader and he's so sure of himself. He's just the absolute evil. He's just sinister evil. There's no fucking wavering in him. You don't see the wavering in him until late in the second movie. So to see Kylo that was just all kind of fighting the good and he just felt like super insecure about himself, it just felt like this feels like Return of the Jedi Vader to me a little bit. So it kind of made me wonder, are they just going to invert it and kind of do the opposite? And I really do believe that if there was a committee or someone that was just throwing shit up for the people liked off the internet to put into the script, I think the big one that they did was the Kylo Ren and Rey becoming lovers, whatever the fuck bullshit, that dumb shit that was. I know that was kind of alluded to a little bit in The Last Jedi, but I don't think that was ever I don't think the idea was then to commit to where they would actually end up together in any way, but that there would be that tension so that when Kylo is then again in the third movie would have been offering to her like, join me, we can rule the galaxy type stuff. Now she's going to fight him with those conflicting feelings of there is like a little bit of a maybe emotional connection, kind of like Luke and Vader, except instead of father and son, maybe there's a little bit of a fancying of one or the other. But I think just the idea was they wanted to embrace the whole Reylo bullshit more, which is sorry, I'm just not a fan of it, never was. And I think that once you do that, you can't have the hero of your story falling in love with someone that's not going to get redeemed. So then the whole thing just, whatever. It's a mess. We're going to talk about that more at length at some point. But that is a tip of the iceberg of my complaints with episode 9. So next up, we've got Andor season 2. Is not coming in 2024, but they're saying maybe 2025. I think we may have talked about this as a rumor already, but I think it's now being confirmed that no, indeed, Andor will not be coming in 2024 with season 2. That makes total sense with the strikes and stuff. I don't think I expected it earlier than 2025, but it is now officially confirmed that no, it will not be coming next year. So that is that. Next up, Dave Filoni is talking about Grand Admiral Thrawn and his foil, storytelling wise. And he says, and I got some quotes here. He says, Thrawn's foil throughout Rebels was Hera. Pitting the two generals against one another is something that I find interesting. And he says we set up, so that's the first thing there. Let me pause and get a little, wet my whistle with some water here. So basically, and I see that in Rebels. We kind of saw that too, because again, you had Kanan and Ezra and stuff, and Sabine. They're a little bit more front lines characters, and then Hera was a little bit more. She was the pilot, but also she was connected to the rebellion, and she was, I don't remember what her rank was, whether she was a captain. I know at some point she becomes a general. In fact, I think that's what she was in the Ahsoka show. But I think ultimately she's this military leader. She's a general. She's it always bothers me in Star Wars because to me, general is like an army term, like an army rank, whereas like admiral is a naval rank. So I feel like like Admiral Akbar, I feel like it should be Admiral Hera, because she's like pilot, and she's like kind of like fleet based and stuff. But either way, I think it's a general for her. But I think so. The idea of her and Thrawn, that makes total sense, because, and it made sense in Rebels too, because she's the one that's strategizing. She's the one that's going to be flying. She's the one that's going to be making the plans for their little cell of people and stuff. Whereas that's kind of what Thrawn, is and does. Versus, you can't really have Thrawn versus like Ezra or Kanan or even Sabine, because it's like, Thrawn's not a physical threat. He's not one that's going to get in a fight with someone. He's not going to duel. Like in Ahsoka, we saw with oh god, I just blanked on her name, Morgan Elsbeth. Like her being a badass with her fucking saber and shit, and then dueling with Ahsoka, like that is her. That works for her. That's never going to be Grand Admiral Thrawn. That's never going to be his strong suit. He is a tacticianer. He's a leader. He's a field general type. Like in the field on a bridge of a Star Destroyer. That's his way. So he's not going to be one that's going to be like necessarily being a formidable one-on-one fight guy. So it never really made sense for him to be foiled against some of the other characters. With Hera, it made total sense. This excites me a lot, because I do think that maybe Dave's kind of giving us some indication of what to expect in the future. That yes, you have Ezra, yes, you have Sabine, you have some of these characters, you have Ahsoka, but ultimately what we need to be looking for when it comes to Thrawn going mano a mano with someone, it is most likely going to be Hera, potentially leading a fleet. And then next up, he also has a quote. He says, "We set up Captain Pelion in The Mandalorian, and that's a character that goes with Thrawn, so I'd love to see the two of them together." And he says, "I think for a long time, as I've learned to work in this galaxy, it's a long play, and if things go right, you get to do more with your story. Things, I think, have broken in a good way for us, and people really enjoy the characters that we've been making. So certain opportunities came up for the further that we went along." So those are some other ideas that Filoni gave to us there. So very excited to see what we have from Dave in the future of Star Wars here. Next up, Ethan Hawke wants to be in Star Wars. He says, "Give me a lightsaber." He's been doing some news stuff, and he said he says he basically talked about he's basically been going on every show talking about he wanted to be in Star Wars. He wants to be in Star Wars. He still does. And he says that hasn't really worked. And this is a quote. He says, "I've been saying it on every talk show, thinking I'm going to get a call or a casting call." He says, "I put it out there, but nothing has helped." He says, "I'll be Obi-Wan's best friend or any role that is offered to him." He says, "I'll do whatever they want. Give me a lightsaber. I'll be a bad guy. I'll be a good guy. I don't care." I will say to that,
just hook it to my veins,
because Ethan Hawke is an incredibly talented actor, and I could really, I mean, obviously my initial impression is going to be he's going to be a bad guy, because I think that Ethan Hawke just has that air about him, but I think you could make him a good guy too. Hopefully the Star Wars folks have some ideas at some point to maybe bring him in somewhere along the line. I know there's a lot of new and cool things coming up in the future here. Next up, we've got and this is like one that doesn't even almost feel like news, because it feels like the last couple of years it's been very little, if anything at all. But E3 is officially dead. The Electronics something expo, I don't remember now. It's the Consumer Expo. It used to kind of be almost like the Comic-Con for video games. It was always kind of a big thing for maybe it's Electronics Entertainment Expo, E3. So it's been a big thing. It's been going on for 28 years, but it is now officially dead. The last couple of years, Nintendo, Sony, all the big companies pulled out of it and didn't really do it. And I think the last couple of years, I don't even know if they had one. I think they basically got canceled because nobody was going to show up, basically. Let's see. But then ultimately what they ended up doing, but I think they kept it alive a little bit. They didn't necessarily throw dirt on it and say it is officially dead. But now they've officially done that. So E3, something that, way back in the day, right out of high school in my earlier jobs, I always thought to myself, I'd love to con my way into getting into E3, because that would have been a fun, like I said, it was like Comic-Con for video games. And back in the day, that was kind of my big thing. I loved that stuff. So that is sad to see for sure. Next up, the final season of Stranger Things is being developed. The rumors are that it is going to start filming in January, so that is coming up very soon. That means in a matter of a couple weeks they're going to start filming it, and that should be interesting to see what we get from that. Looking forward to it though. They left the last season off in a very interesting way, so it'll be interesting to see where we pick up. Now this next one here, we have to talk about this on Dark Tower Palaver as well. But this one is a rumor. And it is the rumor that Frank Darabont might be in talks to direct 2 episodes of Stranger Things season 5. This is a no-brainer to me. Frank Darabont has done 3 of the greatest Stephen King adaptations of all time. All 3 of his Stephen King adaptations are, absolutely incredible. But The Shawshank Redemption is not only one of the greatest King things ever made, but it may be one of the greatest movies ever made. So the dude is just an absolute banger of a director, and I just think this makes so much sense because Frank has those Stephen King connections, and a lot of people have kind of maybe forgotten over the years as Stranger Things has become such a big cultural phenomenon. But ultimately, Stranger Things. Sorry, my eyes are watering a little bit. Stranger Things is ultimately was so Stephen King inspired. In fact, I believe we've talked about on the Dark Tower show that the Duffer Brothers that did the Stranger Things, the reason they did it is because they pitched themselves to do an It adaptation back in the day before Andy Muschietti got involved, and way back in the day, like before that. So it would have been before the 2017 movie got going. And they were turned down, and because of that, they basically took their toys, built their own thing, and it turned out to be Stranger Things. So I think there's an inherent Stephen King DNA in Stranger Things. Even the logo for Stranger Things is the classic Stephen King like typography, like font that would be on a Stephen King novel. So they obviously it just feels like there's a lot of King inspired stuff there. So to bring in one of the all-time bangers for King adaptations to direct some episodes, that would be incredible. Also, we haven't seen Frank do a whole lot of anything since leaving The Walking Dead. In fact, I think he's even talked about that he's retired. I hope that's not the case, and I hope they can get him involved here, because I know I would circle on my calendar the Frank Darabont episodes if he does indeed come along to direct those episodes. Next up, this is an interesting one for me as a history fan. And this is there is apparently a movie about Nuremberg, the Nuremberg trials, in development with Russell Crowe, Rami Malek, and Michael Shannon. And you may have me a little bit with Rami Malek. I've never been the biggest Russell Crowe fan. I appreciate him for what he does, but I'm not the biggest fan. I could take him or leave him a lot of times. But Michael Shannon, I am an absolute adorer of Michael Shannon, so this is incredible. So this is from James Vanderbilt. He's the guy that wrote and produced Zodiac. God damn it, Richard Donner stuck in my head, the Superman director. David Fincher, the David Fincher movie. He wrote and produced that, whereas Fincher directed it. So Rami Malek is going to be playing an American psychiatrist that is tasked to determine if Nazi prisoners are fit to stand trial for war crimes. And then this is actually kind of funny because I actually I haven't even talked about it on this show, but I just bought a book on Nuremberg maybe a month ago, and I think I downloaded it and started listening to it, but I just realized I wasn't in the mood for history at the moment. So it's very, very high on my docket of things next time I get into the nonfiction realm. Is a book on Nuremberg, and I kind of dove in a little bit and read a little bit of it before I realized, like, no, I'm not in the mood for this right now. Let me save it for later. So this just feels like serendipitous that right as I was diving into something into Nuremberg, now a movie is being developed. So I'll have to read that before this comes out. Russell Crowe is going to be playing Hermann Goering, probably the highest ranked German that was put on trial at Nuremberg. Goering, for all intents and purposes, was the second in command to Hitler. A lot of people felt that if Hitler were to die, Goering would have been the one to take over. So he was pretty much the right-hand man. And then, so that's really interesting. Rami Malek playing a psychiatrist, Crowe playing Goering. And then this is one of the things I actually picked up from that book before I stopped reading it. Michael Shannon is actually playing the United States Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson, who ended up being the chief prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials. And again, in that short bit I read of that book before I decided I wasn't really jiving with it at the time. Ultimately, what it came down to was, they asked this guy. He's a justice on the Supreme Court, so one of the 9 Supreme Court members of the United States Supreme Court. They approached him about it, but the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court told him and all the other justices not to be involved. He felt that it would bring some discredit to the court for some reason. I think there was an idea that it was too much of a hot button issue, like, and it felt a little bit political, which they didn't want to get into, so he was told not to, but he ended up taking the job and ended up becoming the chief prosecutor of the Nuremberg trials. So Michael Shannon playing that role. Again, that sounds like a really not fun, I mean, it's obviously a pretty heavy topic, but when you're talking about Rami Malek, Academy Award winner, Michael Shannon, one of my favorite actors working, talking about something that isn't really talked about as often. I mean, I think we all kind of understand a little bit about Nuremberg, but I don't think it's necessarily something that as many people know about. So it could make for a really enlightening movie, especially feels more prescient in these days, unfortunately, than it maybe would have 10 years ago. So maybe the right time to look at something like the trying of Nazis for war crimes. Next up, Warner Brothers. We're diving over into DC Warner Brothers. I kind of made this little news corner. It was going to be just DC, but there's a news thing about Warner Brothers that I wanted to talk about, obviously, because it's huge. So Warner Brothers and Paramount are actually in talks about merging. I really hope this doesn't happen. There are so few movie studios left, and it's getting very bad out there for filmmakers because, the more studios out there, the better, because if somebody, if they got a couple of the studios don't want to do something, if there's 5 other ones out there, there's a good chance the filmmaker can get it made, and then we as consumers benefit because then different things get made out there. The more and more these damn studios homogenize and merge into each other, eventually we're going to be to a spot where there's going to be 2 or 3 studios, and it's just going to be so bland and bad, and it's also bad for the workers in Hollywood. To have less people to bid against each other. It's going to drive wages down. It's going to see less work made. I mean, with the Disney Fox merger, I remember watching as they were laying off a bunch of people because you had people that were redundant. There were people that were if you've got 3 guys from these 2 companies all doing the same job, but you can only really justify 1 or 2 of them, that's going to mean someone losing their job, which is definitely not a good thing. So I'm not a fan. Hopefully this doesn't happen. Hopefully it gets dies in the womb and or maybe even gets shut down governmentally for I don't know, monopoly or whatever it might be. Definitely not a good thing though. Next up we've got Pom Klementieff. I don't know how you say her name. She played Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy, and Miriam Shore have both been added to Superman Legacy, rounding out the cast for that, as they are probably coming to the point of filming that pretty soon. No indication of who these 2 are playing, but they are James Gunn regulars, so it makes total sense that they would be in this movie as well. So looking forward to that movie a lot. Next up, and this is a confusing one a little bit for me, Matt Reeves is developing an Arkham Asylum series, which I think maybe has been talked about before. He's got the Penguin series he's working on, as well as the Batman movies that he's been doing. But the weird one about this is they're saying that he's making this Arkham Asylum series, and then James Gunn recently said that it's for the DCU. The reason this is confusing is because the Batman is not part of the DCU. It's considered like a secondary universe, whatever, because they're going to do their own Batman to link all of the shared universe stuff together for the DCU. So it's really weird to me that Matt Reeves, it's developing the Penguin, this Rogues Gallery for his movies, the Batman series, and then you're going to have him do an Arkham series on Arkham Asylums, which would probably fed out the villains and stuff, the Rogues Gallery. but then you're going to have it in this other universe. Like, does that mean it's not going to apply to the Batman movies? Which it just seems very confusing to me. I don't know how this all works. But James Gunn, I have a tweet from him, and he says, yes, we loved Matt as a director and a producer, so he'll be producing stories both within the Batman universe and within the DCU. So he is going to be in both pawns of the DC universe. I know this is sounding confusing, especially for a fresh thing that they're going to be starting, but I think the Batman was so good, the last thing they want to do is kill it. I do kind of wonder why they don't just make that the Batman for the DCU and just forget about other ideas, but whatever. I don't know, we'll see what they have in store. And then the rest of the news here, or actually most of the rest of the news, is going to be in the Marvel realm. I got one other story that broke today, like an hour before we started recording here, that's not Marvel, but let's go ahead into the Marvel stuff. First off, Marvel, get my thing here. Marvel has confirmed three animated projects that are coming to Disney Plus in 2024. They've confirmed X-Men 97 is indeed coming out this upcoming year. Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, which I believe it has already been talked about. I think they were at one point they were calling it freshman year, or sophomore year, or something like that, senior year, whatever it was. But that's being renamed to Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It's going to be it's an animated show, but it's going to be taking place in the realm of I can't remember which movie. The first couple Tom Holland movies, kind of in that same area. I don't know much more beyond that. And then also Eyes of Wakanda, which is another animated one. Again, I have no idea what it is, what it's about. All I know is it's gonna have something to do with Wakanda, so that should be interesting. We'll see what that looks like here in 2024 on Disney Plus. Next up, Moon Knight writer. That's a fun thing to say. The writer on Moon Knight has joined Captain America 4, Brave New World. He's coming on as a writer for the reshoots. So I believe they've already filmed a bunch of that, but now they're just going to do some reshoots, which I don't think this is like a crazy Daredevil situation where the reshoots means like whatever. This is just normal Hollywood reshoots. They've probably done some focus groups. They found some stuff they liked and didn't like, and they're just bringing another writer on to polish some stuff up to get our final product. It's pretty normal. So that is that. And Moon Knight was awesome, so can't wait to see what he has in store for us there. Now the big one. It's funny because when I was prepping this last week before the Christmas party thing came up, I was prepping a whole thing on a rumor that I found on Jonathan Majors. The rumor was, and I don't have a slide for it because I ended up deleting it because it kind of became moot. But basically the rumor is there was something in Jonathan Majors' contract that basically said that he could not be, he was the only one that could play Kang. Any variant of Kang, basically because they're hiring him on. They were all a fan of his work, and then apparently I don't know how this would have got put in his contract, but he demanded it in his contract that basically no one but him could play Kang, which is why all this stuff with the criminal charges against him has been so weird. And also the reason I wanted to cover it is because we had talked previously about the idea that they were going to potentially completely throw Kang out the damn window and then change the villains midstream. That made no sense to me, but this suddenly makes it make sense, because if there were a thing where they couldn't recast Kang, it might make sense why they would want to change it up, because if you're stuck with Jonathan Majors or no one for Kang, then cool, call it no one and then change it to Dr. Doom or whatever. So I don't know, this is all rumor, but it was something that I found, and I found interesting because it finally made some sense about those stupid rumors that they were going to change it to Dr. Doom or someone else and just kill Kang, or leave Kang out altogether. It makes sense now, though, if that were the case. But all of that is moot because, of course, Jonathan Majors was found guilty of his criminal charges in New York. He got a guilty verdict, and I think within an hour, Marvel announced that he was fired from the MCU. He is no longer Kang. He has been fired. That means that if there were a contract, that has now been voided. So, of course, they can also recast the character as well. There's already been some rumors out there about some options for recasting him if they want to. So he is indeed guilty by a jury of his peers, and Marvel fired him pretty much right away. So it seems like they were holding off on any action on him until there was a verdict, and as soon as the verdict was had, they had their pink slip ready for him right away. So no more Jonathan Majors. He's a piece of shit. I'm not going to miss him from the perspective of that he's an asshole. He's a piece of shit. That the lowest form of life on earth, in my opinion, is domestic abusers. I just don't. It's just something I don't understand. But he's also an abusive person across the board. I mean, there's been a lot that we haven't talked about on the show, but I've seen a lot of stuff. Like his agents fired him before, like weeks ago. That started. There's stuff like that. There was like dozens when the initial reports came out. There was dozens of people dating back to his time at school. I don't remember. I don't think he went to Juilliard, but something similar. So dating back to basically art school. That basically said that he all from the beginning. This isn't like he got big and went to his head and became an abusive piece of shit, but he's basically been in kind of an abusive toxic human being pretty much since day one, and there's people dating back a long way saying that. So seems like he is a complete piece of shit. It's always hard because he was talented. I mean, he did a great job with Kang. I was really excited what he was doing. But I mean, now he's so poisoned in my mind. I know there's some elements where you can maybe try to separate the art from the artist. But I think with actors, it can be hard because, you see a person up on there. What I've always said is, I don't really care for a lot of actors doing a lot. Politically or whatever. And it isn't about like I agree or disagree with their politics. It's just that when they become such a person that about this person, whatever, actor A, he talks about, he does these things for this politician, but he also goes and does these like talk shows, and just when they're out there so often, for me it makes it really hard to not see that person when I'm watching a movie. I like actors that kind of just disappear and you just oh shit, this isn't actor A, this is character X. I love that, and I think it's always really hard with actors when they're so out there. And I mean, I think you see it with social media, because it's not just politics. I don't want it to sound like I'm saying that, because I totally disagree with the idea that actors or athletes should always just shut up and do their job. That's bullshit. People can be politically active. I have nothing against that. I just think for me it takes a little bit away when they become such a defined human being through social media, through causes, through even advertising campaigns, everything that they do. It kind of creates this person. Suddenly, Brad Pitt is Brad Pitt, and you've got all this baggage in your head where it's like, oh, then he dated so and so, and he had kids with so and so, and there's all this stuff that's going on with him, and then suddenly it starts to get hard where it's like, God damn it, now when you see him in a movie, it's like, well, there's Brad Pitt. So I've always had that issue a little bit, and it's more about breaking the image that you get in your head with an actor. I've always had that in my mind anyway. But that, yeah, when you get a person that's an absolute piece of shit like Jonathan Majors, I as much as I've liked what he's done so far with Kang, I would not want to see another instance of him. And I will say at some point we got to talk about Loki, because I do think Loki season 2 ended in a way where they can maybe just wash their hands of the entire storyline and close it out there, and move on to something else if they wanted to. So that's the big one. That's probably the biggest Marvel news. Got a couple rumors here. The first one, rumors are Ryan Gosling is in talks right now with Kevin Feige about an MCU role. That's interesting. Would be curious what he might be involved, what he might do, what character he might be. Obviously there's a lot of projects coming up. There's not even any rumors attached to this as to who it might be, just rumors that he is in talks with Kevin Feige about a potential future role. Next up, this is a really interesting one. And I will go out in advance to say on this, there is nothing with this movie right now, Spider-Man 4, Tom Holland. They don't have Tom Holland signed. They don't have a writer. They don't have a director. They have nothing. This is literally a movie at ground zero. There's nothing here. This is some rumors that basically this movie, Spider-Man 4, would essentially act as a street-level Captain America Civil War, a movie where you'd have kind of a culmination of a lot of different characters coming together. And that is intriguing as fuck. So let me hit some of the things I wrote down. So as of now, there's no one attached, not even Tom Holland. So the idea is this will take place after Daredevil Born Again, and essentially Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, will have successfully outlawed street level vigilantes. He will have made it illegal, and then we would see a divide among street level heroes as to how they would respond to this. And then there was already a previous rumor that Charlie Cox was going to be in this next Spider-Man movie, and ultimately the rumor kind of goes along with this one is that it would basically be Spider-Man and Daredevil versus Kingpin, which in my mind, let me
Just hook it to my veins!
like I've been saying since for the longest time, I want to see a Spider-Man, Daredevil, and Kingpin. That would be an incredible movie. Hi, Alan. Welcome to the show. Good to see you. Thanks for joining live here. So let me hit. I got one more Marvel thing, and then one more news thing. We can jump on over to Christmas stuff. I like I said early on, there's a lot of news this episode just because the culmination of so many weeks between episodes. But then there's just been seemingly a lot of news and rumors. So the next one, and the last one for Marvel, is a rumor is Kevin Feige wants to distance the MCU's X-Men from Fox's X-Men. So much so that there may be a very different makeup for the X-Men than you might expect. The only thing that it really talked about, this rumor, and this is from someone that has had some stuff in the past that's panned out, so this isn't just people talking. Hopefully this is people that legit have a finger on the pulse. The report, sadly, is will be no Magneto this time around to start off with, and the villain would most likely be Mr. Sinister to start off, and then Magneto wouldn't come until down the road. And as an all-time Magneto, in terms of, there's no character in comic books I love more than Magneto. He's my all-time favorite comic book character. So that breaks my heart, but also I'm not opposed to that. I do understand that Feige is dealing with, this other X-Men universe that's existed for 24 years. So I totally get that there's a legacy there that he's got to be really careful that there isn't confusion with the audiences as to what, is X-Men now versus what was X-Men then. So having a different makeup of things and a different villain, all that kind of stuff makes total sense to me. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. Then the last one I have here, and like I said, this one literally broke an hour before I went live, and this is Scream 7 has lost its director. Covered this over the last number of episodes. Scream 7 is falling apart at the seams, and it has been for a while now. And this one is the last straw, seemingly. Christopher Landon, which was hired on a couple months ago as the director of Scream 7, just posted some tweets. So they lost both their young leads, and then they obviously fucked over Neve Campbell in the last movie. So now they're also losing their director, so you don't have your two main leads. You don't have Scream is Neve Campbell. You don't have her anymore, and now you don't have a director. So his tweet said, I guess now is as good a time as any to announce I have formally exited Scream 7 weeks ago. I don't know why my note changed to say 8. It's meant to be 7. 7 weeks ago, or he Scream 7, then pause, weeks ago. So it was weeks ago that he exited this role, which is interestingly right around the time that all the shenanigans happened with firing the star of the movie. He says, this will be a disappointment to some, delight to others. It was a dream job that turned into a nightmare, and my heart did break for everyone involved. Everyone, he restates. But it is time to move on. I have nothing more to add to the conversation other than I hope Wes's legacy thrives and lifts above the din of a divided world. What he and Kevin created is something amazing, and I was honored to even the briefest moment basking in their glow. So very interesting. Not expecting Scream 7 to happen at this point. But that is pretty much the full circle of destruction for that movie, seemingly. So so that is that. Let's go ahead and jump on over to the main topic. I know it went long. Like I said, I knew there was going to be a lot of news, but didn't know it would take that long to get through it all. But there was a lot to cover. So first of all, let me go ahead and play an intro I have here. All right. It was longer than I thought it was. So yeah, Christmas music, Christmas movies. Christmas music in my head there. Let's see. Alan says, well, maybe there will be a new franchise, like called ARG. I'm always like apprehensive because I love the Scream franchise. But it feels to me like in the original, there was 3 of them that came out within a couple of years. And then there was a huge gap until the 4th movie, because it felt like at that point there was enough to state about horror movies that was new. So they made another one. And there was another huge gap, and then there were 6, and then there was 5 and 6, whatever, that came later. But those are way closer together. I guess my hope is that they just don't overdo it, because I think Scream overall has been a really great franchise. Horror movie wise, it's unprecedented how good it's been. They haven't really fallen in quality the way a lot of horror movies do. So I don't know. I'm kind of, in my mind, it's like just take a pause. Let's wait a decade, revisit it, see what new horror things you can address. In whatever in the 2030s, what does the horror movies world look like there, and what can Scream say about it? So so Christmas movies. I wanted to just chat about some Christmas movies. I knew, I thought it would be recorded last week, but had to delay it. Ultimately I knew it would be right here, right before Christmas. We have one more episode next week, but that's after Christmas, so I wanted to cover it this time. So let's see. Let me just dive in. I have a couple things I wanted to talk about, and then we started the whole tier ranking thing. I kind of wanted to do the tier ranking thing after, it's part of the main topic, but I want it to be maybe the meatier part of the discussion. So I have a couple things to hit. Also, actually, I have an email from Mike. Mike is not able to join live, just family commitments and all that fun stuff, but he did send an email. So I wanted to read that. He says, happy holidays, Tad. He says, I won't be able to watch live on the 23rd. I figured I'd send my Christmas list early, use it if it's helpful. Spoilers, I'm not really into old-time movies. And that may be a little bit of a hint for me as well when we get to mine. Honorable mentions, Elf. And I actually don't think I've seen Elf. I think I've seen chunks of it, pieces here and there. But I don't think I've actually ever sat and watched the whole movie, which I do. I think I need to at some point. I will say I'm very negligent to, I just blanked on Will Ferrell. I almost said Ron Burgundy. I have never really watched enough of his movies. I think I've watched Old School and then the 2 Anchormans. Outside of that, most of his movies I have not seen. No, for no particular reason. Hayden always shames me on it because he is an absolute, he adores Will Ferrell. So that's one I might need to watch at some point because I've heard a lot of people talk about it. So, and Alan, I think he was just warning us that there's not a lot of old time movies on his list. So most of his are a little bit more modern versus, maybe stuff from the 40s or 50s. There's a lot of Christmas movies that are a lot older, and he's not necessarily into as many of those. And I will give a spoiler and say my list is also lacking a lot of older ones. I have a couple older ones, but not a lot. Let's see. And Alan says, you and I can only hope a new horror universe may be realized soon. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's a lot of really cool horror stuff. I actually think we're in a golden age of horror right now. In the last, in this decade, in this century, I mean, even since the turn of the century, we have had some absolute fucking bangers of horror movies. I know everyone likes just like, oh, well, the 70s, 80s were so good. But if you go through and make a list of horror movies that we've had since the turn of the century, I'd put it against the 70s or the 80s or whatever. We've had an absolute fucking wonderful era of horror movies. So I can't wait to see what other amazing creative people come up with some really cool stuff in the future. Then he has a top 5 counting down. He says The Santa Claus, 1994. He says, like I mentioned in the Dark Tower Palaver Discord, I like a new twist on old ideas. This plus Tim Allen is an instant hit for me. And then I may be on my list as well. And he says, number 4, Christmas Story, 83. This movie is so funny and slowly snuck its way into the cultural zeitgeist. When I want to swear around my kids, I steal lines from the dad when he's fixing the furnace. You snort huggin', lay monger, snapple sil cocker. Yeah, it's I love the Christmas Story. That's a good one. Number 3, this is one I'm not actually familiar with. Fred Claus, 2007. He says, like the Santa Claus, it's an interesting twist on an old tale. Side note, this movie has a more downbeat version of Goodnight Sweet Prince by Vince Vaughn. So I think I missed when I was reading this email initially, I think I kind of missed what he was referring to, but I think he's referring to
Good night, sweet prince.
the Big Lebowski soundbite we got there. So that's interesting. Maybe I'll have to check that out. And he says, and I would watch Paul Giamatti stand in a line at the DMV, and that's where I agree with you. Paul Giamatti is an absolute treasure. So I missed that one back in the day, so I may have to check that one out at some point. Let's see. And then Alan says the old Children of the Corn is a good Christmas movie. LOL Malachi. Then he says National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation '89. He says this is the funniest of the vacation movies and hands down the most quotable. All year long, I use that's a gift that gives all year long, Clark. That's again, he's hitting some ones that I will probably be hitting as well. And then he says, number one, A Christmas Carol. I'm not going to call him out for cheating, but he has got a list within a list here. So I don't have an Inception button. That's one I should get. He says, this is by far the best Christmas story and all the best movies. That's why there are so many versions. He says, my top 5 Christmas carols are Scrooged, number 5, Mickey's Christmas Carol, number 4, The Muppets Christmas Carol, 92. Number 2, A Christmas Carol, 1999, starring Patrick Stewart. He says, I would watch Patrick Stewart stand in line behind Paul Giamatti, the DMV. LOL, seriously. His Captain Ahab for Moby Dick miniseries is a hidden gem. I need to explore him more. I remember, of course, I'm a huge Next Generation fan. And I've obviously seen the original Dune that has him in it, unfortunately. But I would love to see his Moby Dick, and this Christmas Carol as well. I don't think I've ever seen it. I need to check it out. And then he says, number 1, A Christmas Carol, 1984, with George C. Scott. He says, trivia note, this is the second Dickens story he was in. He was Fagin in Oliver Twist in 1982. Then he says, keep up the great work, signed Mike M. Thank you, Mike. And he says, P.S. if you put the show themes in the title of the upcoming shows on YouTube, I'll send emails if I have anything to add for the show. For the ones I will not be able to watch live. As of writing this, I should be able to join on the 30th show, which is the kind of the year-end episode. So thank you, Mike. Thanks for the emails. I have definitely thought about, I think the thing ultimately, our original idea was for the next time on is we would do it like kind of reveal it with each episode is next time on. I'm not opposed to like doing them a little bit more in advance, but I want to be careful because I want to have some flexibility. Because I don't know, sometimes stuff just comes up. I mean, I know that we kiboshed some stuff earlier in the year because of Ahsoka. And so I want to have some flexibility. So ultimately, I don't know that I'm necessarily going to go really hardcore and like plan a month's worth of episodes topics out. But as soon as I'll at least have them 2 weeks in advance. So at the end of each episode, I want to have the episode for the next one for sure. So, but yeah, thank you, Mike. And Alan kind of alluded to Children of the Corn, calling it a Christmas movie. One of the things I wanted to talk about right off the bat, because again, what I'm going to do is my tier list is I'm going to do Christmas movie tier list. And with that, I'm just going to kind of discuss each movie. And I think that'll be kind of fun, but I wanted to hit a couple things right off the bat. First thing. First of all, what defines a Christmas movie? I know this is an internet debate, kind of like a GIF or GIF, but the big one is Die Hard. I do not call Die Hard a Christmas movie. In my mind, taking place on Christmas doesn't make something a Christmas movie. To me, a Christmas movie actually has to have like some deeper connection to Christmas, and also like I always think of what's his name? Just blanked. George Carlin. George Carlin has this whole bit on the 7 words you can't say on TV, and there's the one time he does the bit where he talks about somebody calls him up and says, oh well, you got a duplication on your list, and then when he argues with the guy and he's like, well, if that counts, then he lists like 5 more, and he's like, oh, that would crowd up my list pretty bad or something like that. It always makes me laugh. But that's kind of what this is, because I think if you count Die Hard just because it takes place during Christmas, then you also have to count Batman Returns. You also have to count First Blood, the first Rambo movie, because that takes place during Christmas too. I just feel like, and I get that, like, there's the ho 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 reference and like whatever. And I know it takes place during Christmas, but to me, like a Christmas movie should be something that you can't remove Christmas from at all. Like, because I think like, if with Die Hard, you could easily just make that a a summer party, you know, like any reason for there to be an office party. It doesn't have to be Christmas. It could have been anything. It could have just been a, like, hey, we're celebrating because we just had our IPO. It could be any number of things, you know. I just think there's ways you could like adapt Die Hard and not have it Christmas, and you only lose like one line, you know, or you know, whatever. Very little changes from the movie. Same thing with Batman Returns. Same thing with First Blood. Christmas is there. Yes, they take place during Christmas. Same with Iron Man 3 is the same way. But those are not Christmas movies because like you could easily remove Christmas from them and they wouldn't inherently change. Whereas I think a lot of Christmas movies that I would define as Christmas movies, like you cannot remove it. It's kind of like Peter and I think we discussed on the show before when it comes to Batman or some of these kind of things where it's like, you know, a Batman movie should be completely like impossible without Batman. Like if there's ever a time that Batman almost feels superfluous to like the movie, then it would be a really bad Batman movie or any kind of character like that, James Bond, anything like that. Like it should feel like their movie and they should be completely untouchable. Like the movie should not be able to exist without them. And I think that's kind of the way I define Christmas. But I definitely get that it's a fun little debate. I also have a conspiracy theory that the Die Hard discussion about whether it's a Christmas movie or not is actually just astroturfing marketing. In the age of the internet, I think that the whole every company wants to try to get something to go viral or whatever, and I will say that that whole argument has revitalized Die Hard into a much larger social. It's larger in the social zeitgeist now than it was around like the late 90s, early 2000s. Like I don't remember when that whole debate started. It was in the 2010s somewhere, but I feel like it's much more in the pop cultural's general thought process because of that debate. So there's always been a conspiracy theory to me that someone at Fox decided to throw that out there, and it just happened to, it just artificially created a trending debate, and now it'll never die. But it'll die hard. Let's see. So yeah, ultimately to me, I've always wondered that though, because it's like, man, to be fair though, I will say that Die Hard is one of those movies I would say is pretty much a perfect movie. There's like no wasted anything in that movie. It's a perfect movie top to bottom. I adore the movie. I really do. But so it definitely deserves the respect that it gets today that it maybe didn't get in 2005, let's say. I mean, I know there was like Die Hard sequels coming out in that time period, but I still think it just kind of felt like a meh. Like I just don't think people were as gaga about the original Die Hard as they are today, and I think that debate might be a part of it. So maybe that's the silver lining to it. And Alan says, I cannot argue, but I understand the tradition. LOL. And he says, circumstantial plot hook, meh. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I love Die Hard. I really do. I've never really counted it as a Christmas movie. I'll watch it all the time. And there's a couple Christmas movies I might actually watch outside of the year, outside of this time of year, but it isn't many of them. So I wanted to talk about my preferences for Christmas movies as well. What I tend to find, what I look for in a Christmas movie, because I'm basically giving you a preamble for my my larger list. My tier list, which I'll have up on the screen here pretty soon. But my whole thing I love about, for me, Christmas, like I'm not religious. So it's not a religious thing for me. And for me, like I kind of live in the real world, and in my real world, there isn't these wonderful Christmas miracles and all this kind of stuff. For me, Christmas has its issues. There's family members you don't necessarily care to see more than once a year that you have to put up with around Christmas. There's the rapid consumerism. There's all the stuff that people would say is the bad stuff about Christmas. To me, is what is Christmas: consumerism, negativity, stress, all the kind of like, and honestly, that's kind of a through line you see through a lot of my movies. Now, there's some of them I have on there that are traditional, like happy, warm, Christmas movies, but kind of like Mike said, he doesn't have a lot of old ones, and my reason, I think, there's some of the old ones I haven't seen, but there are also some of the old ones I have seen that I just feel like I've got to take like a shot of insulin to watch, because they're just so goddamn like wholesome and sweet that it's just like I don't know, and it's just whatever. Like, I get it. It's the feeling that some people like this time of year, but for me, for me, Christmas has always been more of it's a real kind of thing. Like the mystical, happy, wonderful, perfect. It snows perfectly. Everyone gets along. Like, that was never my experience. So most of mine tend to lean into the more I don't know. I guess I don't want to say negative, but the more real, I guess, not the fantasy land. What is it? The night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas. The magical stuff is not necessarily what I necessarily go magnetize to. And then I also wanted to point out one last thing before I get into my list. I will give you a little spoiler. Home Alone shows up somewhere on there. I want to call out the Home Alone score, the scores for Home Alone 1 and 2. Because they were making that movie, the original one, and they were talking about, what should we do for the score for this movie? And somebody jokingly said, we should just call John Williams. I mean, the greatest film composer of all time. And they all just kind of laughed or whatever, but then somehow it got around, and somebody that knew John Williams kind of passed it along, and somehow it ended up being where John Williams did it. And I just wanted to call it out because I've been listening to it a lot. I always listen to it a lot this time of year because John Williams does film scores. They're all brilliant. I love most of his stuff, but he doesn't necessarily do like records for he doesn't do like he's never done a Christmas album, for instance, or Christmas. He's never composed stuff for Christmas. But I will say Home Alone is kind of the exception, because if you do like John Williams, go listen to Home Alone scores. They're absolutely incredible. There's a mixture of real Christmas music that gets mixed in, that's used in the movie. But just what he composes itself is so festive and so Christmassy that it's just like, if you're a film score fan, Home Alone, the scores for Home Alone 1 and 2 are bangers and are absolutely incredible. If you want to hear a John Williams Christmas, that is your route to go with the Home Alone scores. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention before I get to the tier list, and because with the tier list, I want to talk about each thing and talk about kind of the Christmas movies that mean a lot to me. I at some point I'm thinking about maybe if there's like tier lists that are very clean that I can just send out to and have everyone do, and then you could send in your own or follow along or whatever. I want to do that, but Christmas movies are not clean because there are like 100 Christmas movies, and there's just no way that most of them I wouldn't rank. If I was to open up one that had like every Christmas movie ever made, like I would only have seen a fraction of them, and I would only rank even less. I'd rank very little of them, it seems, just whatever. So there's no good way for me to share whatever. But like in the future, if we did like a tier ranking for like Star Wars movies, like that's one I could send out. We all know what the Star Wars movies are. We can all rank them and stuff. So in the future, I might throw it out there to let you guys know tier listings so you guys can play along a little bit more. But yeah, that's let me just go and get, because the only other thing I wanted to maybe touch on was Christmas TV. It was my barber was actually cutting my hair and was telling me that she likes to, if she can, she likes to watch The Office Christmas episodes around the holidays. And I don't think I've ever really done that with television. But I did want to call out The Simpsons. We just had the anniversary for the first episode, which is a Christmas episode. There's a couple of Christmas episodes in the classic era of Simpsons. Usually it's how Homer or Bart screws up the holiday, and then it usually barely gets saved in some way. Never in like a crazy, cool, miraculous way. Usually more of a real blue collar, they don't kill each other way. But I do have to call out The Simpsons for some of those early Christmas episodes. Santa's Little Helper obviously is the first episode where they get him, and Homer doesn't have any money, so they all they get for Christmas is Santa's Little Helper. So gotta love that. Let's go ahead and get on over to it. I was just checking to make sure there was nothing else. But let me get on over to the ranking, and there we go. So the tier ranking. basically, if you're joining for the first time, or if you haven't listened to the last episode, I think is where I did the first tier ranking. I've been wanting to do these for a while. I was even talking to Peter about it back in probably the fall or something, trying to figure out the best way we could maybe implement something like this. Obviously, with now me being alone, this makes way more sense. I think it's a little bit tougher to do with a larger group. Like me and Peter both, I don't know how, like even screen wise, how I would do both of us. But for one, it's easy. So tier lists, it's basically just like your grades in school, A, B, C, D. But then S is like, I've always been told it's Japanese or something. But I've always been explained it's like super. It's like above A. It's the absolute tip tops type stuff. So that's the rankings, S, A, B, C, D. So let's go ahead and let me pull up my list here. So again, these are my and I ended up coming out with 20 of them. I think I ended up thinking I had 21 when I was originally doing the prep on this, and when I was actually doing the setting up the screen stuff, I realized I had duplicated one. So it actually ended up 20, and I wasn't even trying to hit that number. It just happened. So so we'll be having 20 of them. We're talking about, like I said, some of them are nostalgic, some of them are kind of what I just talked about in terms of what I view Christmas movies, how I view them. But the first one is a little bit more nostalgic. Let's see here. What's going on? Why is it not? Oh, that's why. Okay, I forgot. How I transition these slides on this software is a little bit interesting. But the first one is Frosty the Snowman. It is the cartoon. You know what's funny to me though is just recently in the last couple years, the whole Frosty the Snowman song. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like Humpty Dumpty. You never actually are told that Humpty Dumpty is an egg. It's just something we assume. And in the original song, nothing about Frosty the Snowman actually says anything about Christmas. Now this cartoon, which I grew up watching, does. I mean, there's the whole thing. They bring him to the North Pole. There's Santa Claus. So there's a little bit more Christmas with this little movie, whatever, this animated movie. But it definitely, it always trips me out ever since learning that, like maybe in the summer sometime, that Frosty the Snowman, the song, never mentions Christmas anywhere. So but I always love this one. When they put the hat on him and stuff, and he says happy birthday, and he's alive, and of course at the end it does the classic 80s and 90s thing that all kids movies seem to love to do, which is kill off the one that people love. So at the end, Frosty does end up melting and being killed basically. But I don't know, it's kind of like Jake Chambers says, everyone loves to fuck with children because it's so easy to emotionally torment children, and they just seem to love to do it. So agreed with Jake Chambers there, because Frosty's that way at the end. I remember it's one of the only images I really starkly remember is him melted with the hat sitting there and stuff. So but I always love this. Again, a little bit more in the happier, like whatever, not necessarily like the realistic Christmas. This is more of the nostalgic realm. But next up, and this is one I haven't seen in a while. I thought about watching it again recently because it's probably been 20 something years. And this is going to go against type because this is Black Christmas. This is the slasher movie, one of the original slasher movies actually, unless you count Psycho as a slasher movie. This one came out in I think 1974. It's awesome, and I think that we've been seeing a boon recently of horror Christmas movies, or action. There's been a lot of like subverting Christmas expectations with different types of movies, but here we are back in the mid-70s doing it with Black Christmas. I love slashers. I remember enjoying this one back in like high school when I watched it. I would love to watch it again though, because I'm very vague, but I do remember really enjoying it. So from my perspective, I definitely wanted to throw it on the list here. Next up, we have Gremlins to lower out D. The other thing I want to point out too, because I know these ones are ranking down in the D. This doesn't mean that like I hate these movies. If anything on this list is making the list, this is basically my top 20 Christmas movies of all time. So just because these ones rank down in the D section doesn't mean that these like suck or anything, because I too love them. If they ended up on this list, if something truly sucked or I wasn't really into it, they wouldn't be on this list. So Gremlins, this one, like the whole premise of this is the dad can't find the Christmas present for his kid, so he gets him Gizmo from the little crazy evil shop and stuff. And so yeah, it's just like, and then of course Gremlins ends up being what it is. Again, this one may be a little bit more horror. It reminds me of the we covered it on I can't remember if we covered it on this show or Dark Tower Palaver, but Mike Flanagan got on Letterboxd, which is where you kind of like catalog movies and do reviews and stuff, and people make lists on there, and he made a list of like horror movies for beginners, and he had Gremlins on there, and then every other movie he had on there was like some of the most heinous, over the top shits, like the worst, like the deep end of the pool for horror movies. But Gremlins, it always makes me laugh because he used that as like the one to lure people in. If you went and watched through his list, the first one is Gremlins, and you'd be like, oh, this isn't that bad, and then you got into some of the other stuff, it would be pretty terrible. But yeah, I love Gremlins. I grew up loving it. Gizmo, the Gremlins are awesome. It's great effects, and just the chaos and mayhem. And again, you kind of got a horror tinge in there, so definitely going to enjoy that. Next up, I've got Santa Claus is Coming to Town. This is actually this is again more of the nostalgic ones. It's kind of those, like, I always think of like the cartoony Christmas ones. You've got like Frosty, and then you got like this whole set of movies that I don't know if it's like not really claymation, but it's like that weird style. I don't know. There's a few of them that are in this realm. But this one is the one where it's like the mayor hates Christmas, and this is actually the one that I probably watched the most as a kid. And I always remember like the evil mayor and stuff, and I always remember being bothered as a really young kid because Santa is this young guy, and it's like, wait, Santa's supposed to be like older with a beard and stuff. Like this isn't Santa Claus. But this is a fun movie. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I did watch it a shitload as a kid. So this is always one that would be on like cable and stuff back in the day throughout the Christmas season. As you were coming up on Christmas, these would always be playing quite a bit. So in the same vein, in my mind anyway, I don't know if it's the same studios or whoever, but it always feels kind of the same. But it was also Rudolph, the Red-Nosed Reindeer. It's same animation style. Kind of, it has like the little like mountain man guy. Just this whole I didn't watch this one as much as Santa Claus is Coming to Town, but I did watch it. I kind of watched. They'd always have these marathons and stuff, and I'd always watch them and stuff. And these ones are always kind of the ones that maybe not I didn't like the most of them, but I did enjoy them. And if given a chance, if they were like on TV, like going over to a parent's house or grandparent's house that had cable still, because you have to be a parent or grandparent to have cable anymore, I think by law. If this were on, I would certainly leave it on if there was nothing else on, because I would like to revisit these at some point. And I think at some point I had the box set for them. I don't know if I still do or not. I got them for Christmas one year, but sometimes seasonal box sets like that are always interesting because I don't put them on my shelf because they take up too much space, and then I'll put them somewhere else and I'll either lose them, and years down the road I'll find them in some box or whatever. So maybe I still have it somewhere, but I haven't watched these in a while, but I do remember enjoying this one quite a bit. And then Mike already mentioned the Santa Claus. This one actually came out when I was in grade school. One of my favorite stories about this is the Santa Claus, like clause in a contract. And I actually learned that because I was in whatever young enough grade that we were doing like a stupid like spelling test the day before we went to Christmas break. And it was like Christmassy things. It's like, oh, how do you spell Rudolph and whatever. And I remember the teacher saying like Santa Claus. It was one of the ones on the spelling test, but she's like, everyone just know that the movie that they're advertising right now, because it was the year the movie came out, she's like, that is not how you spell Santa Claus. And I don't know why that's always stuck in my mind. So Santa Claus does not have an E at the end, whereas this Santa Claus, like clause in contract, does have an E at the end. I remember being told that. That's how I was always able to like keep the spelling in my mind. So it definitely puts a time and place of where I was at. I was young enough to have, maybe been graded on spelling of Santa Claus in this movie, but I love this movie. I grew up as a younger kid. I watched the Home Improvement show, and I haven't seen anything with Tim Allen outside of like the Toy Story stuff since then. But I did watch the Santa Claus back in the day based on that. And I always love it. Every time I see a Denny's, I always think of the joke in here where he's telling his kid that they burned the turkey or something, and he wants to go to. He's like, oh, we'll go to Denny's. He's like, oh, it's an American institution. Then it cuts in, and it's like nothing but like foreigners. Like, no, there's, like, which in general, if you're going out on Christmas or whatever, a lot of times you have non-Christians, which you tend to see a little bit more in a lot of like immigrant groups that will like whatever. Like I always remember like seeing some people online that are Jewish, and they're like, there's like a special connection with Jewish people and Chinese food, especially on Christmas, because Chinese a lot of times would be Buddhist or something. They don't believe in, they're not Christians, so they would be open on Christmas. There's no reason for them to close. And Jews aren't Christians, so they're not going to celebrate Christmas, so they want to go out and eat. So a lot of times they would have this like serendipitous connection, and I've seen a lot of people say that it's like this magical connection. So but I love this movie. Just the whole idea of he kills Santa Claus. One of my favorite lines in this is after he scares Santa Claus to fall down or whatever, and then Santa disappears because he dies, and he sees his clothes, like he's naked somewhere. There's some funny lines, and I haven't seen this movie in 25 years probably, but there's some lines that still stick with me. And I think there's always like stuff on Reddit and stuff where they find like, oh, in the classroom with the kid, like if you look in the background, there's some elves and stuff. So there's like maybe some deeper cuts where they have some like hints at some other stuff going on. I always remember the tinsel as well, when they cut the jail cell with the tinsel, with the elves breaking them out of jail and stuff. This is just a great one. And then the new wife, or not the wife, the wife's, the ex-wife, I think's new boyfriend or husband or whatever, is played by Judge. I always blank on the guy's name, but his name is Judge, which is the weirdest name to name a kid. What is it? Actor named Judge. Judge Reinhold, which always is an interesting name because it sounds like Reinhold would be an actual judge's name. So I think for the longest time as a kid, I always thought like Judge Reinhold was like a legal show, like or it was like Judge Judy type thing. And it wasn't until like, I don't know, probably 10 or so years ago when I saw something with him and he was like, and it said Judge Reinhold I'm like, wait a minute, that's a dude's name. So because he wanted like the Oscar Mayer Wiener whistle, the Oscar Mayer Weenie whistle, which is always funny too. I don't know. This is probably one I watched a shitload because there's some stuff that really still sticks with me. I remember him going to the doctor and about gaining all the weight, and his hair's going white. There's just all kinds of fun stuff. This is a fun one for sure. I really enjoy it. The one that always gets me with this kind of stuff though is any of these movies that are like kind of real world but have Santa Claus that's real. Like, what are these parents like? How does this work like mechanically, right? So like if you're a parent, you don't believe Santa Claus exists, but then Santa Claus does exist. Santa Claus is coming into your house and giving your kids presents. How do you not realize that like there's presents under the tree you didn't put there? Or if you didn't buy presents and left it all up to Santa Claus, how are you then saying that Santa Claus doesn't exist when your kid wouldn't get Christmas if he did? I know this is like, I'm trying to apply logic to like a movie that shouldn't have this much logic applied to it. But I think last time I watched this movie, I remember thinking to myself, like, they're like wanting to commit, and it's Scott Calvin's his name. I always remember that too, because it's the SC initials. They want to commit him because he's like, talking about he's Santa Claus, and he's like starting to look like Santa Claus, like because of the magic, but they think he's doing it on purpose. And so there's like this whole like mental health idea that gets into it. And but again, it always just made me wonder, well, wait a minute, if you don't believe in Santa Claus, like, how do the presents work? Like, or is Santa just like popping into kids' houses, coming down the, whatever, rearranging how the parents put shit out and then leaving? Because like it just feels like non-believing parents and a real Santa Claus can't really coexist. Let's see. And then Alan says, I always knew him from Vice Versa with Fred Savage. Oh, okay. Yeah. And for me, like, he's been in a number of things. I actually just saw, because again, I mentioned early on in the watching, reading, listening, I've been rewatching Seinfeld, and he is the close talker in Seinfeld. So I actually just hit his episode 2 days ago, as well as, the Fast Tom's original. He's been in a lot of stuff for sure, but the name Judge for a first name for a kid is an interesting one, for sure. But yeah, I really enjoy the Santa Claus. I haven't watched it in a long time, but I believe it's on streaming somewhere. I might have to throw it on at some point and rewatch it for the first time since I was a wee lad. Or probably I may have been in junior high or high school last time I watched it, but it's been a long time. So next up, we've got how this is the animated, the original one from, I don't remember what year this one was. And I can't even do Grinch cartoon because there's been the new one. let's see, 1966. Okay, I was thinking 60s, but then in my head I'm like, if I'm gonna say 60s, it's gonna be like the late 70s or 80s or something like that. And then I'm gonna look really stupid saying, "Oh, this old 60s cartoon." But cartoons are weird, man. They're ageless. There's Disney movies you watch that are cartoons. You realize like, holy shit, this is like so old. My grandma could have watched this as a kid. But you can't tell with cartoons because cartoons are cartoons. Like, I mean, I know there's different styles of cartoons and stuff, but like growing up when I was a kid in the 90s, like there wasn't much difference when you looked across the entire pantheon of Disney cartoons, even though some of them were made in the 1940s, some of them were in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. They all kind of looked the same. Nowadays there's obviously like the computer animation shit. There's a whole different style that happens. But the original Grinch, if nothing else for the song, right? The Grinch song in this is great. I don't know. I obviously grew up on this one. The live action Jim Carrey Grinch didn't come out till 2000, so I would have been 15, I think, when that movie came out. So this one would have been well ingrained in my mind. A lot of times when I hear the Grinch song, there's images from this one that come to my mind. When he's like slithering around like a snake through the one house and stuff. It's pretty great. It's timeless. I feel like I always thought that it was like short though. I don't know how long it is, but like in my mind when I was like kind of thinking about it, I was looking up like Christmas movies to make sure I wasn't missing anything. It was weird that this one, I have it pulled up. It says 26 minutes. So this is a movie, but it's 26 minutes. Like I said, it's like a short film. 26 minutes, that's really short. That's what I kind of thought in my head. I'm like, I didn't feel like it was ever that long. It's obviously not a very in-depth story. So, yeah, do love it though, for the classic Grinch stuff. So that is, now we're in, so I guess I forgot to mention that we were jumping to C for the listeners that aren't watching. But I had Gremlins, Black Christmas, and Frosty at the D level. And then at C level, I had, Santa Claus Coming to Town, Rudolph, the Santa Claus with Tim Allen, the Grinch, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the cartoon. And then to round out C, the last one for the C level, is It's a Wonderful Life. I will admit, kind of like Mike, I'm not as into the older stuff, and more of that is because I haven't seen a lot of them as an adult. I think I should probably go through and revisit some of these really old Christmas movies as an adult, because I think I watched this as a kid with my one grandma. And I remember some elements of it, and I've certainly seen Simpsons has spoofed it and stuff. So there's some stuff I'm familiar with, if nothing else, because the Simpsons spoofed it. But it's like the whole bank thing at the end. Like there's some elements I still kind of remember, but I do actually kind of remember enjoying this one a bit. I feel like there was just enough of like some reality mixed into this one. It wasn't just like full on fantasy land, whatever. And Jimmy Stewart's awesome. I always love Jimmy Stewart. So I did throw this one on there because I do remember watching it with my grandma and enjoying it for the most part. As a kid, I always kind of cringed because it was black and white. Because as a kid, when you're younger, hopefully as an adult you grow out of it. But when you're younger, it's like, oh, it's black and white, it's terrible, it's old. Like anything old is bad, and anything that's black and white is old type stuff. That's my thought process as a really young kid. So, whereas now, obviously, there's a lot of black and white stuff that I really enjoy, and there's even movies coming out nowadays where they'll like remaster it in black and white. Like the new Godzilla -1 is coming out in black and white, or Mad Max Fury Road got put out in black and white. So, but yeah, this is a fun one, like I said, although I can never remember the part where they're doing the whole explanation about banks. Well, it's not here, so-and-so has your money and whatever. And Moe's like, what is he doing with my money? And he starts punching him, and it turns into a big old brawl, because The Simpsons is obviously hilarious and not falling into the understanding of how loans and stuff work at banks, and and that is the reality too. Like oftentimes banks don't have your money. They take your money in for savings and then they'll lend it out to someone else. And like if it doesn't matter for most of us, because most of us have smaller amounts, but if you were a wealthy person that had a large amount of money, you couldn't just go and withdraw funds out of a bank. You would have to tell them in advance so they can make sure they had it on hand and ready for you. So definitely this is one that I might need to watch. I think did they remake this one? I know they remade Miracle on 34th Street, but I don't know if they ever remade this one in color. Not that it matters again, because it wouldn't be as good as Jimmy Stewart and stuff, but I don't remember. This is the one I remember watching with my grandma though, because I remember feeling like as a kid I was like holding my nose and watching a black and white movie. And then the next one is up into the B level, and it's A Year Without a Santa Claus. And of these, like, I don't know what the hell this style is called. I always, like, I think it was a kid I always called, like, the like claymation, even though I don't think they're claymation. I don't think they're claymation. They certainly don't look like what's the Chicken Run and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't look like that at all, but they have a different look. It's not just like a normal cartoon. It looks weird. It looks like stop motion type stuff. But yeah, this one, it was my favorite though. I always loved the I'm blanking on their names now, but the cold guy and the heat guy, the heat miser, and the whatever, in their whole song and dance and stuff. I remember enjoying this one probably the most. I think this is the last one of this whole ilk, but I remember enjoying this one a lot. And I remember this is one of the ones I would always like watch of them. You know, like if this one was on, this is one I'd want to watch, or if we had VHSs. I think we may have actually had this one on VHS when I was really young. So I do appreciate this one quite a bit. Next up, this one is another classic, and it's a Charlie Brown Christmas. I grew up on the Peanut stuff, the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, all these holiday movies. I mean, now I think there's been some controversy to a bit because Apple bought the rights to them, I think. So now they own it. So where in the old days they used to be on, free TV, whether it's PBS or whoever that would air them every year. And now Apple has them, so they're not as accessible to people unless they have Apple's streaming service. But I always love this one. I mean, you can't see a small tree that's small and less than epic without thinking of the little tiny tree from this. And I always remember the one kid that comes out and starts preaching like the truth of what Christmas is and stuff. Again, that's not really my bag. It's not really what I'm into as much. But I do remember that scene a bit. But yeah, growing up, my mom's always been always a big fan of like the Charlie Brown stuff. So we always watch it quite a bit. And I do appreciate it for what it is. And yeah, maybe I do think I have Apple still, so maybe I'll have to throw this one on and binge it. I don't think it's very long either. So next one, this was mentioned by Mike, Scrooged. It has been probably a decade since I watched this, but of the Christmas Carol stuff, even when I was younger, I always remember liking this one for some reason. Probably because it was a little bit more modernized. I always appreciated that when I was younger. Now as I'm older, I probably don't necessarily see the modernized stuff as inherently better than like something that's like period piece or whatever. But I always remember loving Scrooge. I feel like it kind of has that more irreverent style to it. It's a little bit more risque maybe than most of the other Christmas Carol stuff. And I don't know. I appreciate it for that. So, and Bill Murray. I mean, of course, this is no Kingpin, the greatest Bill Murray movie of all time, in my opinion, but it is pretty great. And then Alan says Scrooge and Charlie Brown are staples at my house as a kid. Yeah, I feel like, especially Charlie Brown for everyone, I think kind of was. Because again, I think it was on like PBS or something, so it was really easy, accessible to everyone. But Scrooge is definitely one that if you had, you kind of had to be in a family that was like into that kind of thing. I don't think this is like one that your average, if you asked 50 people, I don't know if as many people had Scrooge. So I'm glad, Alan, you did, because I was the same way. We had the VHS for Scrooge, and I always enjoyed it because, again, it just felt, I don't know, maybe as a kid you like, it feels a little bit more risky because it's like, it's modern and like it's a little bit more rough around the edges. It isn't so wholesome and pure. I don't know, but even though it is still telling a wholesome and pure story, right, it is adapting the Dickens story, but it just felt a little bit more interesting to a younger kid. So, although I do need to watch the Patrick Stewart one, because Patrick Stewart is a saint, and yeah, he's incredible, and him doing like classical stuff like that is great. I was just thinking, I was thinking not too long ago, I was like, I kind of want to maybe dive in and read some Shakespeare. I haven't read a lot of that since high school, but I was like, Shakespeare's not really meant to be read. It's meant to be performed. I'm like, I wish there was just like a time machine and you can just go and get Patrick Stewart and some of these like legit actors to just go through and act all the major stuff out. Cause I'm sure there's some movies for some of them, but it's like, imagine just like a anthology like show that's going to go through and do all these different productions of Shakespeare stuff and have people like Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Michael Caine, like all these legendary dudes. Of course, they're all aged to the point where that's probably not realistic now. But if that's why I said you'd have to have a time machine. But And then next up in the B section, we already kind of talked. I talked a little bit about it when it comes to the score, but it is Home Alone 2. So while I was in Arizona a couple weeks ago with Hayden, went down to see a comedian. We were talking about somehow it got brought up that, in my opinion, the absolute coup de grace of Home Alone, all the two Home Alone movies, the absolute one that kills me every single time is when Marv gets electrocuted in the second movie and when he turns into a skeleton. It is the funniest shit. I laugh every time because it is. I love absurd humor, and that is as absurd as it gets. And he turns into a skeleton. And he still has the afro and stuff. I love it. And it was funny. Hayden and I were in Arizona, and we were chilling. And we were going to go out and get some breakfast and stuff. And Home Alone was on, and I saw on the TV guide, because the room, of course, had cable. And the TV guide, Home Alone 2 was on. And it was like, I think the last thing we saw before we turned it off to go, we went to go get breakfast, went to Costco, a few different things. But when we left, it was like him dropping the groceries in the first movie. And I was just like, all right, it'll all be over by the time we get back. But then we got back, and it was literally like right before everything started in the second movie. So we were able to just have it on and watch. And when we watched, I died. It's so funny when he turns into a skeleton. It's the height of comedy for me. I adore it. But I love part 2. It's funny, we were just talking about it at my Christmas party last week. There was actually, the year this came out, my grandpa they had the Talkboy, which he has, the little tape recorder thing that, you talking to and then replay and it'd do slow motion, all that shit. They actually made real Talkboys, and they did a boy one and a girl one. The boy one's the gray one like he has, and then the girl one was pink, and my grandpa bought one for each of us grandkids, the boys and the girls each. And it's funny because not too long ago, I mean, the last number of years, I looked it up on eBay, and they were actually fairly decent. Let me see, price-wise, in terms like, man, I wish I still had one to throw on there and sell. Let's see what, not too bad actually now, $100. One that still has the packaging for $400 basically. I mean, $100 we're talking, but still, I thought they were a little bit more expensive last time I looked. But yeah, they've become collectible. But yeah, I remember that year because I remember just playing with that thing and just loving it because it still did the slow motion. It was shitty. It was just a tape thing, so it used tape. It wasn't digital or anything. But it didn't sound as good slow motion wise as it did in the movie. But it was still kind of fun. But I love this one. The New York stuff, all the gags. I did show Hayden. There's the whole video that I can't remember who did it now. I don't think it's College Humor. There's someone that did it where they did a whole video where it's basically goes through. They go through the two movies and they show how many times the two characters Marv and Harry would have died, and it just goes through and just like whatever, subdermal hematoma, Marv is dead, and whatever. At the end, it's like you need 40-something Marvs to get through the first two Home Alone movies. And the one is the bricks in Home Alone 2. Like, every one of those would be a fatality. I mean, just getting beamed from like a 4-story building with a brick to the head. 3 or 4 of them that he gets hit with. Just, it's so bad. It's so funny. And Marv just takes all the abuse. But yeah, I really enjoy the second one. The first one's the classic for sure, but the second one, you've got the New York stuff is really interesting. You got the crazy bird lady. You've got I don't know. It's just, it feels like similar enough that you were kind of getting what you loved about the first one, but you're also getting it in a different way. It didn't feel like a rehash, but it didn't feel so far removed that it felt, I don't know. I think we watched the rest of the movie, when we were there in the room. So that one's fairly fresh in my mind. And I really, really enjoyed it. And again, now if we're looking at the numbers here, this is into my top 10 as well. I know we're doing it in the tier list, so it's not a top 10 list, but number 10 was Charlie Brown, I think. And then Scrooged, and then Home Alone. No. Take that back. Scrooge is 10. Home Alone 2 is 9. Again, I don't want to look at this in the top 10 realm, but I just wanted to say it for an FYI, because ultimately this is a tier list. We're still in the B stage. Home Alone 2, and of course, that would put, because I do pair them up. I almost think of them as one thing. But the first one, Home Alone 1, is the last one I have for the B level. I love the original Home Alone. Watched a shitload as a kid. I remember the year the second one came out. I remember going to see it in theaters and stuff. We got the Talk Boys from my grandpa. But I remember the first one I never really saw in theaters, but I saw it on VHS and stuff, so I watched the shit out of it. All the stuff, I mean, just everything about it. It was just, as a young kid, I probably was not far from Kevin's age in the first one when I was watching it. So it's just like a wish fulfillment, you know? It's like you just imagine, like, because, you know, of course, as a kid, you don't think of the actual danger that he was in. You just think out of it from the perspective, oh, he's kicking their asses, like he's defending everything. He's having so much fun. He's alone. He's jumping on the bed. He's watching gangster movies, eating ice cream. Like, everything about it is just like, you know, fantasy fulfillment for a child. So I remember just adoring this movie, and it is a little bit better to me than the first one. You know, Catherine O'Hara, also, I can't believe I've talked this long about Home Alones, the two Home Alones, without talking about her, because she is an absolute treasure. She is a national treasure, an international treasure. She's a joy, and she's wonderful in these movies. Of course, John Candy in his small role in the first one with the Polka King stuff. Alan says, I fell out of my seat laughing in the theaters at Home Alone 1, LOL. Yeah, I didn't get that one in the first one, but I do remember loving the hell out of it. It's so funny. And I always tell people I'm a massive horror fan. Y'all know that by now if you've been listening to this show. I will say, too, I've seen a lot of heinous shit in horror movies over the years, but there's almost nothing worse than when that nail goes into Marv's foot in the first movie. And the sound it makes, that squishing sound as that nail pierces his foot, it's just absolutely brutal. I mean, I know there's some other stuff that would hurt way worse, but that one gets to me, man. Ugh, just it gives me the willies. But I do love Home Alone. I already mentioned it earlier on the John Williams side too. If you want a John Williams Christmas, look no further than the score for these movies, because John Williams, at the height of his power, scoring these movies, he basically gives us a John Williams Christmas, which is a fucking absolute joy. The theme, the main theme for this is one of the most beautiful things that he wrote. And I know it'll never get the same credit as things like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Jaws, all the big shit. But of like the lesser, and I don't even say lesser because it's not lesser in terms of quality, it's just the less popular stuff. There's stuff like Home Alone and Hook. Those are fucking banger albums when it comes to the scores. So, absolutely adore these movies, adore the scores. This one does kind of, and I will say that's the other thing I guess I should have said about like my overall view of Christmas movies, where I did say a little bit more realistic. They're not like over the top, sweet, happy, whatever. I will say there's a little bit maybe more like cynicism and realism to the movies I like, but almost every single one of them do have some sort of happy ending or lesson involved where somebody learns their lesson or they kind of get their happy ending. Home Alone comes to mind in both cases, right? He reunites with his family and stuff. So all of what I was saying earlier about, the old movies are so damn sweet and just wholesome and like unrealistic even in some ways because they're just so over the top, like nice and happy and whatever. That's not to say that the movies I like don't actually have happy endings or kind of teach you a little bit of a lesson about like, well, don't be like this guy and he learned his lesson or whatever. Or in this case, like, you know, he's kind of being a shitty little kid, wishes his family away, then he gets his wish fulfilled, and then he starts to realize like how much he misses his family and stuff. And you know, the touching scene when he's going to talk to the Santa Claus and says he doesn't want anything other than his family back, and just great stuff. Also, as modern fans, the other thing that's fun is Fulton, the little bedwetter in these movies, is Rory McCulkin, which now has probably most famous for Succession. He was played Romulus in Succession, as well as he played he was in the Scream 5, I think it was Scream 5 or Scream 4. Scream 4, I think. Yeah, I think it was the fourth one that he was in. So that, you know, he's Macaulay Culkin's brother, and he plays his cousin in Home Alone here as a little kid, a little bedwetter, and then he would go on and play in Scream 4, and then he played huge. I mean, everyone knows and loves him now for playing Roman in Succession. So it's kind of fun to go back and see those small scenes with him to realize that later on he'll become kind of a legit full-on actor, not just a kid that's getting a part because his brother's a huge star. Also, I know it's not a Christmas movie, so I'm not going to go too far into it tangent-wise, but I do want to mention, because you can't talk about Home Alone in my mind without mentioning at least Uncle Buck, because that was the inspiration for Home Alone. There's the scenes with Macaulay Culkin and John Candy, and that was kind of the genesis of the idea for Home Alone. And I do think Uncle Buck is my all-time favorite John Candy movie, and it's an absolute fucking wonder of a movie. So just because we're mentioning Home Alone, I at least have to mention that, because if not for John Candy and the Uncle Buck movie, which is incredible, we would never have had Home Alone. So now moving up to A tier. First one we got here is A Muppet Christmas Carol. I mean, I loved the Muppets growing up, all the different stuff. I mean, there's Muppet Babies, there's all kinds of different things. Muppets are all over the place. Alan says, God bless John Candy. Agreed. And I know I just mentioned him also in Home Alone, because he did have the cameo in there as the Polka King of, is it Chicago? No, they're from Chicago. He's from Milwaukee, I think. It's been a minute since I saw that scene especially. I've just saw a couple bites of it when I was in Arizona. And the John Candy stuff is blanking. I'm blanking on it right now. But the Muppet stuff, I always loved the Muppets. I always thought they were really great. Michael Caine plays Scrooge in this. It was funny because I saw a tweet very recently where they were talking about the Muppet Christmas Carol, and somebody was just saying it's kind of a proclamation of like, A Muppet Christmas Carol is probably the most beloved millennial Christmas movie of all time. And I was like, I can't argue that. I mean, there's movies I love more than it, but I think like if you went across the millennial, zeitgeist, I feel like if you asked every millennial Christmas movies and then you like average them out, I bet you anything Muppets Christmas Carol is probably going to be the most mentioned one, would be my guess. And then it was funny because the person I saw the tweet through a retweet, because the person that retweeted it said that a Muppet Christmas Carol is to us millennials what It's a Wonderful Life was for our parents or grandparents. And I was like, yes, that is absolutely true. I love it. Honestly, the Muppets in general are always just fun in general, but I love the Christmas Carol. It is probably my favorite Muppet movie, of all the Muppets. And also Hayden, I was just on that trip with him. There's almost never a time that at least once, if I spend like a weekend with Hayden, or a week, if we go on a long trip, that at least one time, one of us is going to go do the Miss Piggy, hi-ya! Because it's just hilarious. I don't know. I love Muppets, man. They're great. And Muppet Christmas Carol is an absolute gem and a joy. Next up, going back to the horror realm, this is a newer movie, actually, a newer relative, and it is Krampus. So Krampus, I remember seeing the trailers for it, and I thought, oh, great. They're just going to make like a B-rate horror movie that's based on Christmas. And that's kind of what I expected. Like, it has the Todd Packer from The Office, and he played the sports guy in Anchorman. They had the Ben Wyatt from Parks and Rec. So there's like these actors in it that were like kind of like B-level actors, and most of them are comedic. So I'm like, okay, so this is like 100% just let's embrace like, and I'm not gonna bash B-rate horror movies. If you're trying to make a B-rate horror movie and you understand that's what you're trying to make, then all the power to you. It'll probably be wonderful, and it'll probably be enjoyable. But I went in with that expectation, and I walked out of that theater going, holy shit, this movie was like legit. This movie was scary as fuck. It wasn't, I mean, it looked a little bit cheesy at times, but overall it was pretty fucking scary. As well as I love the message of it. I mean, the whole idea is based on the German legend of Krampus. And there's a kid that kind of loses his, he loses the hope in Christmas or whatever, and he has like I think he's like saying something about Santa, he gets made fun of, and he has like a list to Santa, and he rips it up and then throws it out the window because like whatever, he's crying because he's being made fun of for believing in Santa. So then his sadness and his disbelief then sparks Krampus to come and terrorize and kill people, and all kinds of horrible, evil little things happen. It's a really good horror movie. I highly recommend it to anyone because it is not like a cheesy horror movie. It is one that will actually plays pretty scary. There's a scene where you see like the silhouette of Krampus on top of the house. Sometimes you'll even see that as like an image for the movie, and it's just creepy as fuck. There's one point someone's under a car, and you get like the hoofs of Krampus like coming along the side of the car. It's just it's a true horror movie, but it just feels like it has that built-in element of Christmas, because at the end, the only way they are able to overcome Krampus is for the kid to kind of re-spark his belief in Christmas and the Christmas spirit. So again, that's what I'm saying, like with the Die Hard stuff, is like, you know, yes, this is a full-on horror movie, but it's like, this is so much about Christmas that Christmas is the only reason that this exists. Like, this cannot exist otherwise. And that's kind of what I mean. So I love this movie, and I am a horror fiend. I love horror, so I'm never going to not reference some good horror movies, and Krampus is top shelf Christmas horror. And then next up in the A tier, A Christmas Story. So this one, in terms of family traditions, this is one of the big ones. I don't remember exactly when we got cable. I think I was in like 6th grade, and then had cable all the rest of the way through high school. And so as part of that, and even before that, I think somebody had this on VHS, so I was able to watch it a lot as a younger kid too. But I remember once we got cable, is TBS would always play The Christmas Story 24 hours. They'd started at Christmas Eve, 5, 6, whatever o'clock. They'd start A Christmas Story, and then it would literally just play on repeat until Christmas night. So like, I remember many Christmases that we would turn the TV on, anywhere from 6th grade on, and TBS would be on in the background. And you know, so as I was opening many Christmas presents over the years, you know, Christmas Story is going on in the background, you know. So this is just one that I absolutely adore. I'll always throw it on, even if it's just to be noise, even if I'm not going to fully engage and watch it. I'll have it on at least one time during Christmas. I don't have cable anymore, but I do own it on disc and stuff. But I love this movie because again, it kind of has that. It's a little bit less perfect, you know, like he ends up getting what he wants, but then he kind of pays for it. You know, the BB gun. It's everything about this movie. The Santa Claus, you know, up with the slide thing, just everything about this movie. The bullies, this whole movie is just classic. It's quotable all over the place. I remember in probably the late 2010 or the early 2008, 2009, somewhere in there, when I was still working, not necessarily making any kind of good money, there was a company that was doing a full replica of the leg lamp. And I was just like, God, I wish I could. But it was so expensive because, like, they're obviously making it as, like, yeah, it was like a custom-made thing. It wasn't, like, being mass-produced or anything. But I over the years, like FYE or Media Play, they'd have, like, small versions of it and stuff. I would love to get a leg lamp at some point. That's pretty cool. Ovaltine. I've never drank Ovaltine in my life. I actually never knew it was a real thing until I think it was like Seinfeld referenced it, and I was like, wait, Ovaltine wasn't just invented for The Christmas Story? And then I realized, like, no, it's real. I don't know if I've ever even seen it in a store anywhere, so I've never had it. I was always a Nestle Quick kind of person, but I do love Christmas Story and Ovaltine up until, I don't know, the last 15 years. I used to think Ovaltine was not a real thing, and it was only in the last maybe 15, 20 years that I realized that Ovaltine was a real product that a lot of people love and drink. But yeah, this is a great one. I'm trying to think, like the tongue stuck to the pole. I remember I got my tongue slightly stuck to a thing, but it was on accident. I was trying to, like, this sounds terrible now because, like, you realize as an adult how dirty everything is, but I was just trying to lick some snow off of like a something, like, it's like not a banister. A banister's in a house, but like it's on my grandma's patio, and it was like this metal like thing that kind of boxes in the porch. And I was trying to lick snow off of it, and my tongue barely caught to it. It was enough where I was able to get it off without too much of an issue. But it was always funny because then, you know, it was just like, I didn't know if that was even real from A Christmas Story. But then at that point I realized, like, no, it's real. So yeah, don't lick metal shit. Yeah, love A Christmas Story. And in terms of traditions, this is probably the one that has the deepest tradition for me. Again, we'd watch it. We'd always watch it all the time, but it would be on constantly. Like from the time it started, Christmas Eve, like there'd be a TV on in my house somewhere with it playing. So, pretty great stuff. Next up, the last one for A tier, and it is, of course, Nightmare Before Christmas, the classic. This one, just wonderful, wonderful movie. This, of course, you can always debate whether it's a Christmas movie or a Halloween movie, or, I mean, of course, it's both. But I love this movie. I mean, I still listen to the soundtrack. I wouldn't say like regularly, but I'd say at least once or twice a year, I'll get a hankering and I'll throw the soundtrack on, which, speaking of Patrick Stewart, because I don't think it actually is in the movie, is it? Didn't they cut the Patrick Stewart stuff out? But it's in the soundtrack where he does the narration for it. You know, so every time I listen to the album, you got like him doing the narration, Patrick Stewart. But this is a great one. Oogie Boogie is my absolute favorite. He's great. He's got the best song in the movie too, which is always the case, right? The villains always have the best songs in all the movies. But this is just a great one. I've loved this since day one. I remember having it on VHS as a kid. You know, back when it was whatever studio, because this is back when Disney refused to acknowledge it as their own, because they thought it would be too scary and they didn't want to associate it with Disney. Now, of course, they do, but back then it was like Touchstone or one of the Disney subsidiaries. But yeah, this is a great one. Well, this one like is very Christmas ingrained, but in terms of ones I'll watch outside of the Christmas season, this is definitely one I'll watch it around Halloween. I'll watch it in the middle of summer. I'll watch it in March. Like this is just one to watch anytime. It's a great one. Catchy music. The animation's great. It's just great characters, fun stuff, and it's also the ultimate mixture of horror in terms of Halloween. I know it's not a horror, but it's the Halloween spirit along with Christmas. It's pretty great. And Sandy Claus instead of Santa Claus, 9 out of 10, or not 9 out of 10, probably 7 out of 10 times. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, I'll just say Sandy Claus, and a lot of people, I don't know whether they pick up on it or not. They usually don't acknowledge it, but I like to say it because it's a fun little reference. But I love A Nightmare Before Christmas. It's one of my favorites. But now we're getting into the S tier. That is the A. So A is Nightmare Before Christmas, Christmas Story, Krampus, and A Muppet Christmas Carol. So now we're to the S tier. These are the top of the line. This is the top echelon for me. These are my absolute favorites. These are the ones that cannot be topped. And I know that not everyone's going to agree with me. And maybe nobody will agree with me hardly, but these are the ones that absolutely rule for me. The first one for S tier is The Grinch. The Grinch, I think is just what it's called, right? The Jim Carrey one from the year 2000. This is one of the most quotable movies for me. Me and my cousins, me and my one cousin, especially, and my brother would hang out a lot. We're the ones that grew up watching horror movies and stuff. We would quote Jim Carrey stuff, and mostly Ace Ventura. But when The Grinch came out, there's still, I mean, to this day, Peter could back me up because I record the podcast on Audacity, which is the software. Open source software for recording audio stuff. And there's the line in The Grinch where he's like, the impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall. Like, I say that every single time I open up Audacity because it's such a quotable movie. Just across the board, Jim Carrey absolutely nails it. But again, what I love about this one is it kind of has that like that real twinge to it, like Cindy Lou, who's not really buying into, everything, because all she's seeing is the mass consumerism. It's all about the Christmas lights and the Christmas cards and the festivals and the buying the presents, and it really reflects what Christmas is to most human beings. And for her, she's seeing that as a negative. She's like, shouldn't Christmas be about more than this? So again, it does have that message where it's like ultimately it does, pan around to getting you kind of a happy ending, but ultimately it is a movie that is kind of looking at Christmas, examining Christmas, not necessarily just pretending it's this thing that it's not. And I do love it. Just there's so many quotable lines. As I'm surprised I don't have anything on my soundboard from this movie, to be honest, because it's a great one. Jim Carrey kills it. I often say that in my opinion, like the peak Jim Carrey is like the mid 90s. You got like Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura 2, and then I think at the fringe of it you got like Liar Liar in 97. I think those movies are just like untouchable. Some of the best shit you'll ever see if you like Jim Carrey. But I will give, from a complete outlier, The Grinch, I think, is the last Jim Carrey movie that was just absolutely, like I said, me and my cousin, like, we don't see each other nearly as much as we did when we were kids, such as life. But I think even when we still do, or see each other on social media, there's probably a Grinch reference in there somewhere. This movie is just insanely quotable. There's so many good gags in it. Ron Howard directed it. Anthony Hopkins narrates it. It's great stuff. One of my favorites. And this is actually one that I've been known to watch. Like, I'll just be like, you know what? I know it's a Christmas movie, but it's fucking July, and I just really want to watch The Grinch right now, and I'll throw it on. So it's one of the few that break outside of the normal realm of watching it during Christmas, because this movie just rocks. It's quotable. It's funny. Jim Carrey fucking kills it. and the shit he had to go through with the makeup for this movie was like, I think they had to bring in like crazy like Secret Service people to like teach him how to like, maintain under torture to figure it out, because it was just so constricting, that this makeup stuff, that it was essentially nigh on torture for him to be in the makeup as long as he was for all this stuff. But it's a great one. And then I think somewhere, God, did I put it somewhere in this episode? One of my things, I thought I said something about Christmas music and said, blast this Christmas music. It's joyful and triumphant. Oh, I love Jim Carrey. He's the man. All right. So the next one, and this is probably not a huge surprise. It is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I love the National Lampoons. This is my family in a lot of ways. We always used to joke about being the Griswolds, because it seemed like every vacation we went on, there was always just, and I guess it's probably that way for everyone, right? Like, nobody has perfect vacations. But it's just like, it felt like anytime something could go wrong, it did go wrong. Like, we never had like insane shit like people dying in our car, or like the park was closed, or nothing nuts, but like it just felt like we had just enough dysfunction in our family, and there was just, every time things would happen wrong, it was just we'd always just joke that we were the Griswolds. And the Christmas Vacation, like for some weird reason, probably because we did some Vegas vacations when I was a kid, Vegas was always one of my favorite movies of the series, but I think Christmas is definitely number one, and then Vegas is number two for me. And then the first one, and then the European last. But this movie, it's so quotable. I mean, Cousin Eddie is incredible, and I think Cousin Eddie being heavier in this and Vegas are also heavy in their favor. But it's just like everything. The squirrel in the tree is absolutely incredible. The cat getting electrocuted. Like, there's so many funny things in this movie. But it also, again, it has all that realism in it. Like, you got the family you got to deal with, all this kind of stuff. But then at the root of it, like, Clark is kind of like touching into the idea of like what Christmas should really be about and stuff. And then the Jelly of the Month Club, like, it's the gift that keeps on giving, Clark. It's wonderful. I absolutely love it. And it's tough because now, like, it's become way more public about how like much of an asshole Chevy Chase is, like, in general. And maybe he wasn't back in these days, I like to hope. But I do really enjoy Christmas Vacation. And then then this has the Elaine from Seinfeld is in this as well. She's the neighbor. Wonderful movie. And then anyone that knows me, and maybe podcast wise, I don't know how much I've said it on any podcast, because I don't know where it would have come up in the Dark Tower stuff. So I don't know that I would have necessarily mentioned it there, where we have like 8 years of history. So maybe this is I don't know if this will be a surprise to anyone. Anyone that knows me well enough will know what I always say is the greatest Christmas movie of all time, though, and I will never apologize for it. For me, it's Jingle All the Way. Jingle All the Way is, in my mind, it is the greatest Christmas movie ever made, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. What is it? Sinbad. Phil Hartman in one of his last roles. Unfortunately, he was murdered shortly after this movie was filmed. Just an incredible movie. Again, this one fully embraces the whole, and Jake Lloyd, which is young Anakin Skywalker. But I think this is before Star Wars. I think this is like the project he did right before. Jingle All the Way is 1996. Yeah, so it is before. But this movie is just it's incredible. I mean, like I said, Phil Hartman is incredible. Arnold does a great job in it. But he is supposed to buy the hottest toy, and then like he has to run around, and it's Christmas Eve when has to like leave to go buy this, because he told his wife he bought it weeks ago and he didn't. And just all kinds of hijinks ensue. Phil Hartman's trying to move in on his wife. He's kind of a negligent father. He's like more worried about his work and stuff than anything else. Just everything about this movie. There's a cop in there that has a few good bits. But just there's some great lines in it. And it's just wonderful, because again, it just embraces that element of like really what Christmas looks like for people. And I don't think my parents ever necessarily went through this. I do know my dad is a collector, and he would collect toys and stuff in general, and we got a lot of Christmas presents because of that. Like I had most Star Wars toys, and they're coming out in the 90s and stuff, because even the ones that were harder to find, because he was out there early in the morning going to buy when shipments first got put out and stuff. And I do know that there were some times that he caught wind of like what might be hot. And I remember, I don't remember if he ever did anything with Beanie Babies, but I remember Furbies, the year those were really big. He ended up buying a bunch of those, and like he got early on into eBay and was selling them on eBay for somewhat of a profit and stuff. Because like he just, it's kind of like Dwight in that one episode of The Office where he kind of he figured out what that doll would be popular, and then he just bought a bunch of them and then just sat on them for a bit and then sold them. And that's pretty much what my dad did. Was he was going to these stores to buy different things. He'd be like, all right, let me buy some of these things. And I think the one year he bought some Power Ranger stuff for us, and he bought some extras, and ended up like selling them because they were like kind of became hot or whatever. So he would never like buy out stores, so I wouldn't say he's like going full on scalping, but I do know like some of the elements of this movie just really felt like my childhood, in terms of like, not necessarily because my dad was like a dipshit that forgot to buy what he needed to buy, but because like some of the stories I've heard from my dad about like going to the stores and like you see it in this movie. Yardley Smith, I can't remember if her scene got deleted. She's the voice of Lisa Simpson in the Simpsons, and she's the one that has the doll that he tries to buy outside the store, and she won't sell to him. I don't remember exactly how it all went. Maybe it's a deleted scene, but it's just great. Arnold is incredible. I of course he's the action star, but some of his non-action stuff is some of my favorite, and Jingle All the Way is my absolute favorite. Also, I loved it as a kid. I was really appreciative because people now that would go back and rewatch it would appreciate it more now. Growing up as one of that lived off my dad's comic books, I was always a fan of some Marvel stuff, and the little boy has the big Captain America painting on his wall, and as a kid I was always so damn jealous of that. But most of my friends like, Captain America, what the fuck's that? Like, it wasn't really relevant to our generation. Nowadays though, everyone knows who Captain America is again, so I bet you people will go back and revisit that and go, oh shit, look at that cool fucking painting on his wall. So, yeah, I love Jingle All the Way though. It's one of my favorites because again, it kind of has that reality to it, kind of the dark side of Christmas, the reality of Christmas. But at the whole of it is he ends up kind of learning, to better appreciate his family, and at the end, he gets the doll from the kid, and the kid then ends up giving it to Sinbad to give it to his kid because like everything that happens, he ends up thinking that his dad is Turbo Man. And the Turbo Man's another one that I'd love to buy at some point. If I ever got a chance to buy a Turbo Man, that'd be a fun one to have as a collectible. It was never a real toy, but I think it's since been made as a collector's item for this movie. So, yeah, it's Arnold yelling at Phil Hartman over the phone to stop eating his cookies is one of my favorite lines. There's so many good lines in this movie. Absolutely incredible. But this is my top 20 for Christmas movies, tier-wise, tier rankings. So again, S tier, Jingle All the Way, Christmas Vacation, and Grinch. And then A is, because I don't think I recapped them, A was Night Before Christmas, Christmas Story, Krampus, and A Muppet Christmas Carol. So that is my overall ranking. It looks like we did go pretty well in time. I didn't suspect I would have gone short because I knew going through these and kind of chatting through them would take up some time. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, just Christmas movies. A lot of fun stuff when it comes to the holidays. A lot of fun movies. I got to decide now what I'm going to go watch. Because I guess I got some time. I'm not going back to work till the 2nd. And of course, there's always the grace period too, right? You can even watch movies a little bit after Christmas if you want to. But yeah, these are my favorite Christmas movies. I'm sure at least once Christmas Story is going to get thrown on at some point in the next day or two. But Jingle All the Way, Grinch, like going through and talking through these makes me really want to watch some of them now. But that's covering some Christmas movies. It is again the last episode for Christmas. Only a couple days till Christmas. But let me go ahead and get on back to the there we go. The outro type stuff. The only thing to mention, if you want to email the show, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you want to tell me Die Hard's a Christmas movie, you can send your arguments in, but do know that you're pretty much not going to change my mind. Every argument you can make, I've pretty much heard, and I don't necessarily even think they're necessarily bad arguments. I just don't buy them necessarily. Or if you have any disagreements with me or agreements on what any of my choices for my tier list Christmas movies, shoot those over at tad@geekeryabides.com. Again, TADD is tad at geekeryabides.com. Send me emails about anything, show ideas, again, feedback on this stuff. Send me some lines from Jingle All the Way or The Grinch if you want to send me some quotable lines. You can always do that. But yeah, that is let me go ahead and get the next episode. So the next episode, we're going to be here in a week, back to normal time. I think, actually, what do I have on the screen here now? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, December 29th. Because I'm trying to test out some different things. So it's actually going to be less than a week. So I think what I'm going to test out for this episode is Friday. So I'm going to do a Friday night show. I'm showing it at 5 p.m. I might shift that to 7 p.m. 5 p.m. is about what it is right now live. So where I have it scheduled is basically 20 minutes ago is when I'd be starting, just on Friday. Maybe I'll keep it there. Maybe I'll move it to 6, but it'll be right in that 5 to 6 to 7 o'clock range. But I'm going to try a Friday night show. It is really challenging to do 2 full episodes back to back without Peter here, because it's just me talking and the voice can get worn out. So I want to try to figure out, I'm going to break the shows up to where they're not. And also, like, look at this. I went 2 hours and 20 minutes on this episode. So I want to have the freedom to be able to, like, go a little bit longer if needed as well. That'll be another benefit to it. But because of that, I'm testing out exactly how I want to do it. They're going to be on the same weekend for sure, but I want to test out a Friday night, and then, like, I guess this one technically took place right when we'd been doing the Dark Tower show normally. I think at some point I might test out maybe just like a later show, like do Dark Tower at like 2 and then do like one at 7 on Saturday. So have a little bit of a buffer to give me some time to relax, rest my vocal cords, maybe grab some food, and then come back. So I'm testing it out to figure out exactly what it's going to look like. But now that it is just me, ultimately we bunched them together to make it as convenient on Peter as possible with his family and stuff. So without that being a thing, I'm going to test out some different things on exactly how to execute the shows. But for now, let's basically say see you guys. Because it's also going to be, I guess the episode's going to be 2023 recap and then the 2024 look ahead recap. I guess just kind of looking at like kind of year in review, like what did we see, what did we play, like what kind of recap the year in general, about kind of what's the year in review. Not necessarily, we're not going to go through news stories and stuff throughout the year, but like what are movies we saw, what are games we played, what are books we read, what are kind of that kind of thing. But then also look ahead, because one of my favorite things I do this time of year when I'm on vacation, I always take this week between Christmas and New Year's off, and one of the main things I always do is I'll go and take a look ahead at what the movie calendar looks like for the next year, and I'll make me out a hit list. I rarely hit, I don't think I've ever even hit close to 50%, because there's some movies that end up getting delayed into a further year. There's movies that are like TBD because they don't really have solid dates and they don't actually get released. I remember because apparently there's a movie adaptation of the Wicked play, which is the Wizard of Oz told through the perspective of the Wicked Witch. That's a movie that I think has been on my hit list because it's shown for like 3 years in a row now, and I still don't think it's even began production. But it keeps showing up on these lists where it's like, oh, Wicked will come out in 2024. It's like, I doubt it. I think I had on my list in 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Not 2020, obviously, because, well, we didn't know exactly what COVID was looking like in December. But honestly, I'm not always good about going out to see every movie I want to see, but what I like to do is make up that list, and then kind of it gives me an idea of what the year looks like, and we'll also talk about that kind of stuff, like what's coming out for movies, what's coming out for books, what's coming out for video games, kind of look ahead at what 2024 looks like, and then maybe what the show is going to have in store come 2024. So it'll kind of be like a cusp show between the 2 years. So don't necessarily have an idea. We don't have anything set like Dark Tower Palaver. But yeah, that is kind of what I have in mind for the episode come Friday. So see you guys in less than a week. Sign off as I always do by saying love what you love, let your geek flag fly high. And if anyone has a problem with what you love, tell them go to hell. And then of course, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate, whatever you believe in, Happy Festivus, if nothing else, and of course, I guess I won't say Happy New Year because I'll see you guys again before then, but we will be back, like I said, we'll be back on Friday, and I will make sure that I think I'm going to keep the time where it's at, so we'll leave it at 5. And 5 Mountain Time. I'll have it scheduled on YouTube, so you'll be able to go in and see the time, what it looks like for you, what your time zone is. But see you then there for that episode. Then the next day, I'll do Dark Tower Palaver for the year-end bash. But that is it. And see you guys in about 6 days. Thanks for joining, Alan. Always love having people as part of the conversation. I know this is a rough time for people. If people are traveling, this is a travel time and or family time. I know I thought about even doing this one on Friday, but I had some stuff. And I actually, with this cold, I'm glad I did today because I was a little bit worse off yesterday. This worked out pretty well. My voice didn't give out, and I didn't start coughing or sneezing or anything crazy. So it worked out well. Yeah, I know it's. I figured this would be a little bit less popular, being the Christmas Eve, as the wife says in Jingle All the Way. But thanks for joining. See ya next. Or see you on Friday. I guess not next Friday because it's just next Friday, or on Friday in 6 days from now. See you guys.